Chapter 501. After the green flames in the distant sky disappeared, the people of Dayang City felt that it was strange, but they gradually lost interest. After all, it was too far away and they did not know what had happened. It was just another topic of conversation. The entire Dayang City quickly returned to peace, and the people's interest shifted back to the martial arts competition. The excitement of the rich and powerful easily attracted the attention of the common people. On the drill ground of the palace, more than 10 arenas were competing at the same time. Zhang Peng was in the Baiwan Nation's lineup, and he had already fought 5 matches. Ordinary children of rich and powerful families who practiced martial arts were no match for him. He was an old general who had fought on the battlefield, and his speed and eyesight after cultivation were far superior to mortals. He did not want to waste time with those mortals, so he beat his opponents to the ground with a few punches and kicks. He suppressed his cultivation or else someone would die. After he left the arena, he returned to the Baiwan Nation's lineup and felt bored. He was tall but he looked listless. Although he kept a low profile, his moves were too conspicuous. Not only did he attract the attention of the competitors from various countries, but he also alerted the spies in the palace. The news quickly reached Zhao Heng's ears in the imperial study. Zhang Peng? Zhao Heng looked at the eunuch in shock. The old eunuch with white hair on his temples smiled and said, "Master, you worry too much. This Zhang Peng is not Zhang Peng from Wuxia Nation, but the youngest son of an old general from Baiwan Nation. Because he cannot inherit the title of nobility, he came to Dayang Nation to find a way out." Zhao Heng nodded and asked, "You said that he won 5 matches in a row and he did not use more than 3 moves in any of them? With such good skills, even if he cannot inherit the title of nobility in Baiwan Nation, can't he find a good way out?" "Master, you know the situation in Baiwan Nation. It is normal for brothers to kill each other. I think it is because of this that he came to Dayang Nation," the old eunuch said respectfully. Zhao Heng thought for a while and did not say much. He only ordered, "Pay close attention to this person. If he is really a talent, try to recruit him." The same news quickly spread to the Lu Xiang house in the West Palace courtyard. The 3 sisters had also been paying attention to the news of the competition. When they heard that there was an outstanding figure called Zhang Peng, the 3 sisters looked at each other in dismay. How could there be such a coincidence? The eldest sister, Zhao Rongxiang, hurriedly asked the servant who relayed the news about Zhang Peng's origins. After learning that he was from Baiwan Nation, the 3 of them heaved a sigh of relief. None of the hundreds of cultivators in the side hall spoke a word. All of them were looking at Yu Qianqiu. Everyone knew that after today's battles, Yu Qianqiu's name would be well known in the cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu and Xen Laosan were staring at each other. What made Yu Qianqiu depressed was that wherever he went, Yu Qianqiu would follow him. Whenever he sat down, Yu Qianqiu would sit beside him, smiling foolishly. How disgusting. Normally, other cultivators were not allowed to enter the palace, but the 3 Mi brothers obviously turned a blind eye to this guy. No one else had any objections either. It seemed that he really had some background. "Xen Laosan, why do you keep following me?" Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't stand it anymore and asked impatiently. Xen Laosan was a little puzzled and said, "Didn't we agree? I'll buy you a drink." "I don't think I agreed." Yu Qianqiu snorted. Xen Laosan waved his hand and said, "It's okay. It's not too late to agree now." Nongzhu, who had been quietly watching the show, giggled. She also didn't know why Xen Laosan kept following Yu Qianqiu, but it didn't stop her from watching the show. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "There are so many people here, why do you want to drink with me? What's the use of so many people? Just set a fire and it'll be over." Xen Laosan said loudly. Everyone in the room blushed at his words. Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, this guy is a little heartless, but so many people are afraid of him. He paused and asked, "Xen Laosan, I don't drink with people I don't know for no reason. What's your background?" "You don't even know my background?" Xen Laosan acted as if he had heard something unbelievable. Yu Qianqiu showed a look of disdain and said, "You don't look like a spirit-severing expert." Xen Laosan ignored his sarcasm and patted his chest. He said proudly, "I come from Lingfang Valley. My master is the Valley Master of Lingfang Valley." Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment, then his eyes lit up and said, "Your master is the world's most beautiful woman, Lu Yanqing? What do you want?" Xen Laosan immediately became alert. He had seen this person's eyes and tone in many people who had evil intentions towards his master. It's nothing, just casually asking." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. But this guy kept staring at him. He was full of thoughts. Maybe he had some ulterior motives. At this moment outside the hall, Mi Russian walked in. He cupped his hands towards the crowd and said, "Everyone, today's competition ends here. We have already selected 100 winners from each country, and they will continue to compete in the next few days." After saying this, he stopped. His meaning was obvious. He was sending the guests off. No one wanted to stay here for a long time. Not only were they not allowed to walk around, they were also not allowed to watch the competition. Of course, everyone understood that this was because they were afraid that the cultivators would secretly help the contestants of their country and interfere with the fairness of the competition. The group of people began to disperse and walked out of the side hall, returning to their respective protected targets. Among the contestants, some were happy and some were worried. Those who were happy were naturally successful, and those who were worried were naturally eliminated. After returning to Baiwan, everyone got on the carriage and went back. In the carriage, Yu Qianqiu saw Zhang Peng's dejected look and asked curiously, "Zhang Peng, what's wrong? Is there anyone who is your match?" "No, I won 5 matches in a row." Zhang Peng said sullenly and then smiled bitterly, "Master, can we not compete? It's really boring." Yu Qianqiu looked at Nongzhu and Farong in the carriage and said, "Let's talk about it later." After the group of people returned to Baiwan's embassy, they had just entered the small courtyard when they suddenly saw a person flashing through the air. Nongzhu, who was the fastest to react, grabbed the person's neck before he even landed. This person was none other than third brother Xan. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. This guy actually followed them here. Zhang Peng looked puzzled, not knowing who this person was. Third brother Xan, whose face was red from being choked, said intermittently, "Senior Nongzhu, please have mercy." Nongzhu sneered, "Third brother Xan, you really don't want face when I'm trying to save you. You actually dared to break into my residence without permission. Others might be afraid of your master, but I'm not. Believe it or not, if I cripple you, your master will at most scold me." After that, she threw him aside and rolled on the ground a few times. Yu Qianqiu secretly clicked his tongue. In the hands of a soul-forming cultivator, a cultivator at the late stage of crossing heaven's tribulation was like a chicken. It was very difficult for him to defeat a cultivator at the late stage of crossing heaven's tribulation. This was the gap between them. Third brother Xang gritted his teeth and got up. He bowed and apologized to Nongzhu. It was true that third brother Xian and his brothers could do whatever they wanted in the cultivation world because of their master, but there were indeed people they were afraid of. Needless to say, there was the most powerful master in the world who almost flattened Lingfang Valley. Mr. Nongzhu was also someone they could not afford to offend. If he taught them a lesson, their master would not say anything. Moreover, Wen Lanfeng would not necessarily look for Nongzhu to settle scores with. "Tell me, what are you doing here?" Nongzhu shouted. Third brother Xan answered obediently, "Senior, I'm here to have a drink with him." He pointed at Yu Qianqiu. "Don't talk nonsense with me." Nongzhu glared at him and shouted, "Get out of here." Third brother Xian trembled in fear. Before he could turn around, he saw Wen Rui teleporting. Wen Rui glanced at third brother Xan and said to Nongzhu anxiously, "Sir, I have to go back to Baiwan country. I'm afraid I can't accompany you." Nongzhu frowned and said, "What's wrong? You look so anxious. Did something happen in Baiwan country?" The others also looked at him. Wen Rui paused and shook his head. "To tell you the truth, our ancestor has come out of seclusion." Nongzhu and third brother Xin, who was secretly eavesdropping, screamed at the same time. Farong and Zhang Ping did not know who they were. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, "Has Senior Wen Lanfeng come out of seclusion?" Wen Rui nodded silently. Third brother Xian, on the other hand, had teleported away with a swish sound. He was suspected of informing Wen Rui. Nongzhu smiled bitterly, "This is troublesome. Wen Lanfeng, don't be impulsive." Then she pointed at Wen Rui and said anxiously, "Wen Rui, go back as soon as possible and find a way to stop Wen Lanfeng. Don't let him go to the demon domain now. Old Bai has urgent matters to attend to. If he goes there now, he will be courting death." Farong and Zhang Peng looked at each other and did not know what they were talking about. Yu Qianqiu understood. He knew that when Lanfeng went into seclusion after being defeated by Master. Now that he came out, he would probably go to Master to fight again. Wen Rui nodded and turned around. He turned back and said with a solemn expression, "Sir, I have something to ask you. I hope you can tell me the truth." "Say it." Nongzhu frowned and did not know what he was hesitating about. Wen Rui was puzzled. "Our ancestor has been in seclusion for 100 years. When he comes out, his cultivation must have improved greatly. But from what you said, do you still think that our ancestor is no match for Bai Changchun?" How can a grain of rice compete with the bright moon? Nongju sighed and said, ordinary experts at the late stage of transforming spirit realm, no matter how high their cultivation is, can make people feel a bottom line. But Bai Changchun always gets stronger when he meets strong opponents. His cultivation is so profound that it is unfathomable. He is a powerful existence that cannot be judged by common sense. Although I don't know how high Wen Lanfeng's cultivation is after coming out of seclusion, I know that if he provokes Bai Changchun again, he will lose his life. Chapter 502. When Rui's face turned pale in an instant, he said, "Is Bai Changchun invincible forever?" Alas. Nongju patted him on the shoulder and said, "Bai Changchun didn't summon Wen Lanfeng because you saw the battle in the East Sea. But let me tell you, Bai Changchun didn't do his best at all. When you go back, just tell him the scene of the battle and Wen Lanfeng will retreat. Go quickly. You will regret it if you are late." "Thank you for your advice." When Rui bowed deeply, he understood that there was no successor for the Wen family. His cultivation was not enough to withstand the wind and rain for the Wen family. Once the ancestor died, the whole Wen family would suffer a disaster. After saying his thanks, he quickly disappeared. There was a sound of rapid flying in the air. The yard was quiet for a while. Although Furong and Zhang Peng did not know the reason, they could tell that it must be a tricky matter. Yu Qianqiu asked, "Will Wen Lanfeng really go to my master after he finishes his closed-door training?" Zhang Peng was shocked. No matter how stupid he was, he could tell that his grandmaster was an invincible existence. For a moment, he stood there silently with a surge of emotions. Nongju shook her head and said with a wry smile, "I really don't know what to say about Wen Lanfeng. He is obviously a genius, but he is deeply in love. You can't imagine how obsessed he is with Lu Yanqing. For Lu Yanqing, he will definitely fight with your master after he finishes his closed-door training. But your master is now at the critical moment of refining the spirit treasure. If Wen Lanfeng goes now, I'm afraid your master will not be merciful anymore." Yu Qianqiu smiled and also felt that this kind of person was very interesting. He asked, "Doesn't Wen Lanfeng know how to run when he can't win?" Nongju looked at him with deep meaning and sighed, "You haven't seen what your master is like when he really fights, so you don't know how terrible he is. Run. If Wen Lanfeng angers your master, where can he run to?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He had never seen what his master was like when he fought. He thought about it and asked, "Doesn't Lu Yanqing know how to persuade him? Are you willing to see him take the risk?" Hearing this, Nongju looked around and found that Xen Laosan was nowhere to be seen. She smiled bitterly and said, "If he knew the news, he would probably advise me. I hope third brother Xian can send the news back in time. What I fear is that Wen Lanfeng will head straight for the Yao region the moment he comes out from his cultivation retreat. That would be interesting," Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself. "That's why I can't stay here any longer. I have to rush back to the demon ghost territory. I hope I still have a chance to stop this from happening." Nongju suddenly stared at Furong, who was blinking her eyes, and said, "Little girl, come with me." Furong was stunned and weakly asked, "Where are we going?" "You didn't tell her?" Nongju turned around and asked. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head in embarrassment. He walked over and held Furong's shoulder. "Furong, it's like this. Since you're with me now, you should at least pay your respects to my master. Go with Senior Nongju." Before he could finish, Furong grabbed his arm and asked nervously, "You don't want me anymore? Are you kicking me out? Don't kick me out, please." Yu Qianqiu's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly felt pain, but a warm smile hung on his face. He gently pulled Furong into his arms, gently patted her back and said, "Silly girl, how could I not want you? I'm afraid that one day you won't want me anymore." "I won't. I want to be with you for the rest of my life." Furong buried her head in his arms and tightened her hands around his waist. "Listen to me." Yu Qianqiu gently pushed her away and said very seriously, "As a disciple, I feel very guilty that I can't be filial to my master. Since you're my woman, you have the responsibility to be filial to my master. Senior Nongju is my master's close friend. He will take you to my master. I've talked to Senior Nongju. If there's a chance, he will take you to his purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. There are many beautiful purple bamboos there. I'll go to see you then." Furong's face was full of reluctance, but she slowly lowered her head and said softly, "I know." Nongju looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. She didn't expect this guy to have such a warm side. He was obviously afraid that this girl would be in danger with him, but he still tried to coax her. She couldn't help but tease him by sending a voice transmission. "Boy, is this a white lie?" Yu Qianqiu didn't bother to pay attention to him. He gently lifted Furong's face and slowly took off the human skin mask on her face. He shook it in his hand and said, "When I miss you, I'll take out your face and have a look. When I'm free, I'll go to see you immediately." After revealing her original face, Furong blushed after hearing these words of love. She looked at Nongzhu and Zhang Peng with embarrassment. "Master is so mushy." Zhang Peng shuddered and turned around. Nongzhu raised her eyebrows and thought to herself, "I knew it. I thought there was something wrong with this guy's appreciation ability. It turns out that he is also a stunning beauty but not as beautiful as my Z." "Alright. You two don't have to talk about love anymore. Yu Qianqiu, before I leave, I have something to tell you." Nongzhu's words broke up the affectionate couple. Yu Qianqiu came over and bowed respectfully. He said, "Senior, please say it. I'm all ears." Nongzhu felt a little uncomfortable when she heard these words. She guessed that this guy had changed. His words were so polite that they were mushy. She glanced at Furong behind him and immediately understood. This guy was still the same. He pretended to be obedient when he needed help. Now was not the time to argue with him. She said with a serious expression, "Yu Qianqiu, I have to remind you. Don't go too far when you stir up trouble here. Experts in the soul formation stage are not like those cultivators you've met. When they fight, it's as simple as releasing 2 flying swords. At this stage they fight with lightning. It's not something you can withstand with your current cultivation, so you'd better not provoke them. Don't think that your blue fire is very powerful. It can deal with those in the crossing calamity stage, but it's useless against those in the soul formation stage. You've tried it with me in the South Sea. You should know that the blue fire has no effect on me. You're on your own now. Thank you for your advice. I'll keep it in mind." Yu Qianqiu bowed. He looked very respectful, but no one could tell what he was thinking. "Let's go," Nongzhu said. She covered Furong with a light ball and quickly flew away. Yu Qianqiu didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to Furong. She was already gone. Yu Qianqiu withdrew his gaze and said slowly, "The 2 soul formation stage cultivators have left. If we stay here any longer, I don't know if someone will come looking for trouble." Zhang Peng's eyes lit up and said, "Master, I don't want to participate in that competition anymore. Why don't we leave Dayang City now?" Yu Qianqiu turned his head around and said with a sneer, "Don't worry, we are not in a hurry to leave. We can't let He Zongming take advantage of us like this." He immediately forgot what Nongzhu just told him. He patted Zhang Peng's shoulder and joked, "Have a good competition and try to get the princess into bed as soon as possible." "Master, do you really want me to be the son-in-law of Dayang Kingdom?" Zhang Peng was stunned. "Damn. Don't you know what a joke?" Yu Qianqiu coughed and said, "There's no rule that says if you sleep with the princess, you must be the son-in-law, right?" Then he brushed past Zhang Peng and said, "You rest. I'll go find the person who invited me to drink." Zhang Peng was stunned and thought back to his words. Yu Qianqiu probably didn't expect that a casual joke of his would really make this guy do something stupid. Yu Qianqiu wandered to the gate of the embassy. He looked around and leaned against the high wall outside the gate, looking around. The guards at the gate looked at each other. They all knew that he was an important guest, but they did not know what this important guest wanted. He acted like a beggar. In fact, Yu Qianqiu was waiting for someone. He was waiting for Xn Laosan, who was always following him. He believed that Xn Laosan was not following him just because he wanted to buy him a drink. He must have something to tell him. Since he had something to tell him, he would definitely come back. He was afraid that Xn Laosan would be scared by Nongzhu and would not dare to go in. Therefore, Yu Qianqiu waited for him outside the gate. Just as Yu Qianqiu expected, after about an hour, Xn Laosan came out of nowhere. He shook his head and sighed while looking at the high wall of the embassy. He did not dare to go in again. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu cursed. If he had known earlier, he would have stood at the corner of the gate. He leaned against the wall and pretended not to see anything. Xn Laosan was bored and looked around. Finally he saw him. At first he thought he was mistaken. He rubbed his eyes, but the figure leaning against the wall looked very much like Yu Qianqiu. He could not help but walk over and poke his head over. It was indeed Yu Qianqiu, who was taking a nap with his head slightly lowered. He laughed and said, "Yu Qianqiu, it's really you. Why are you hiding here?" Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and ignored him. He said, "Can't I bask in the sun?" "Bask in the sun?" Xn Laosan looked at the darkening sky. Some people had started to light up their lanterns. There was no sun at this time. After a while, he suddenly realized, "Oh, I understand now. Did Mr. Nongzhu kick you out?" "I understand. Mr. Nongzhu's temper is not very good." He shook his head and sighed. He touched his neck subconsciously, probably remembering the time when he was beaten by Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu wanted to laugh when he heard his self-justifying explanation. He found that this guy was a little silly. So he deliberately asked with a sullen face, "What are you doing here again?" Xen Laosan clapped his hands and smiled. He pulled his sleeves and said, "Let's go. I'll treat you to a drink. I know a good place in Dayang City." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and stared at him for a long time. His eyes were rolling around. No one knew what he was thinking. Xen Laosan felt guilty and asked, "What are you looking at?" "Nothing." Yu Qianqiu leisurely said, "It's not that I can't accompany you to drink, but I like to drink wine with women." He raised his hand and pointed at a distant street where colorful lanterns were lit and a place full of women were chattering. Chapter 503. Third Xian's eyes followed and his face turned green. He shook his head like a rattle. No, I can't go to that place. I can't go there. Let's go somewhere else." His master, Lu Yanqing, was the most beautiful woman in the world. There were many lechers in the cultivation world who came here because of her. The whole Lingfang Valley hated lechers the most. How would he dare to go to a brothel? If this got out, his brothers would beat him half to death even without his master's punishment. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and looked at him playfully. "What? Are you worried about money? If that's the case, then forget it. I only like to go to those lively places to drink. I don't want to go to other cold and quiet places." Third brother Xan pulled him back and said with a bitter face, "It's not about money. I can afford to drink wine no matter how expensive it is. But brothels and similar places are forbidden to the disciples of Lingfang Valley. Let's go somewhere else. There must be a more lively place." "What a joke." Yu Qianqiu shook his hand off and snorted coldly. "What right do you have to apply the rules of your spirit Fang Valley to me? I just like to go to places with a lot of pretty girls to drink. Don't ask me to drink if you're not sincere. Don't look for me again. Sigh. Don't go. Let's talk about it." Third Xan stared blankly at Yu Qianqiu, who ignored him and went back into the embassy. He walked around the wall helplessly. After a while, Yu Qianqiu came out of the embassy again. He was wearing a brocade robe and waving a big golden folding fan in his hand. The big group of rich peonies was dazzling. He walked with his feet splayed and swaggered towards the pink slumber brothel. He had the demeanor of a playboy going to a brothel. Third Xian was dumbfounded. He thought to himself, there are all kinds of birds in a big forest. Although he thought so, it did not stop him from following Third Xian. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him, who was following him with his head lowered. He was also wondering why this guy was looking for him. He was willing to go against the rules and visit a brothel with him. Neither of them spoke. When they were about 10 meters away from the brightly lit building, Xen Laosan pulled him back again. Yu Qianqiu scolded coldly, "Why are you dragging me again? Let go. Otherwise don't blame me for being impolite." "Alright, you're amazing. I know you're the strongest below the soul formation stage. How about I call you Master Yu?" Third brother Xian smiled bitterly. Yu Qianqiu's expression softened a little. He did like the title of the #1 expert even if it was below the soul formation stage. However, his words were merciless. "With your age, I can't afford to be your uncle. If you have something to say, spit it out. If you have something to say, spit it out. It's fine to drink here, but you're not allowed to do anything else." Xen Laosan gritted his teeth. "Let go." Yu Qianqiu knocked his hand with his fan. "You don't need to treat me and I don't need you to accompany me. I can afford to have a drink with the courtesans. I don't need anyone to interfere with my freedom. Get out of my way. From today onwards, I won't have anything to do with you." "Wait." Xen Laosan took a step back. "I won't interfere, but you have to promise that you won't tell anyone else that I'm here." As soon as he said this, Yu Qianqiu's gloomy face brightened up. He put on a smile and patted his chest. "Don't worry about that. You can ask around in the Chinese cultivation world. I'm famous for keeping my word. I'll never tell anyone else that you're here. Only the heavens, the earth, you and I will know about this." "Ha. That's good, that's good." Xen Laosan's face was full of embarrassment. "Let's go." Yu Qianqiu dragged him along. Xen Laosan kept looking around, afraid of bumping into someone he knew. The 3 golden words "Warm Spring House" shone brightly under the colorful lights. It was a gold-lettered signboard. The entrance was full of beauties. One by one they pulled the passers-by inside. Some who didn't want to go in at first couldn't resist the crowd of breasts. They touched their money pouches, clenched their teeth and went in. Yu Qianqiu was dressed like a rich playboy. It was very eye-catching. One look and you could tell that he was a rich man. The eyes of the girls below warm spring building immediately lit up, and they swarmed over, squeezing and rubbing against each other. Yu Qianqiu laughed unscrupulously and walked in. Third brother Xan closed his eyes under the heavy encirclement. He was almost dragged in by Yu Qianqiu. Once he entered the door, he felt his body turn cold. Young master, young master, young master, old master. A series of greetings were spat out, making people's bones go soft. Yu Qianqiu was obviously not afraid of this scene. He folded his fan and flicked it here and there, tapping here and there. Xan Laosan was already a little stunned. At this moment, a middle-aged brothel keeper came up to them. Before she could say anything that would make people's hearts ache, Yu Qianqiu waved his fan and sneered, "Good private room, good food and wine, red card girls? Not a single one can be missing. Otherwise I'll get people to tear down your broken brothel." His words caused a bit of an awkward silence. The brothel keeper was stunned. But she was also a person of etiquette. Naturally, she wouldn't be annoyed by a word or two from a guest. She immediately put on a smile and turned around to greet the guests. The surrounding immediately returned to singing and dancing. The brothel keeper personally led the two to a large suite and asked if they were satisfied. She secretly looked at the two curiously. It was the first time she saw a hedonistic son forcefully dragging a farmer-like man to a brothel. "Stop nagging and quickly make the arrangements." Yu Qianqiu took out a gold ingot and threw it to the brothel keeper. He shouted without hesitation, "Scram!" The brothel keeper caught the gold ingot and weighed it in her hand. When she realized it was real, her face bloomed with joy. He was indeed a rich man. She didn't care how unpleasant the guest's words were and quickly retreated. Money makes the world go round. This generous man's service could be said to be godlike. Not long after, the good food and wine that Yu Qianqiu ordered and the red card girls arrived. For a moment, the room was lively with singing and dancing. As he listened to the tune, Yu Qianqiu's mouth moved from left to right. A mouthful of wine, a mouthful of food, all of which were served by someone. His two hands were touching everywhere, provoking a series of cries of "annoying." Xan Laosan was surrounded and hugged by a few girls, but he felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He didn't dare to act rashly. He was like a block of wood, looking at the girls as if they were skeletons. "Touch your waist. So flirtatious. Touch your back. Sleep with me. Touch your thighs. So much water." Yu Qianqiu was singing an obscene song. Wherever he sang, his hands would touch. He kept flirting with the girls. Xan Laosan stared at him dumbfounded. Seeing how smooth he was playing, he was sure that this guy was a frequent customer of such occasions. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him from time to time, but seeing that he was unmoved, he gradually lost interest. A seductive girl with half of her snow-white breasts came up to him and said, "Master's song is really good. This is the first time I've heard it. Please do me a favor and teach me. Once I master it, I'll definitely sing it for you." "You think I'm a singer?" Yu Qianqiu's tone was cold. The smile on his face disappeared instantly. His gaze was like a sharp knife, scaring the girl. The girls around him looked at each other and immediately came up to ease the atmosphere. "Get out, all of you, get out!" Yu Qianqiu shouted. With a wave of his arms, 5 or 6 girls fell to the ground. He pointed at the girls around Xan Laosan and said, "You guys get out too. Without my permission, no one is allowed to come in." A cold and gloomy aura caused the dozen or so girls to shiver, and they immediately retreated with pale faces. Without the chattering and soft girls around him, Xan Laosan heaved a sigh of relief. Yu Qianqiu picked up the big fan on the table, opened it and waved it. He said coldly, "Tell me, what do you mean by following me around?" Xan Laosan was stunned. He waved his hand and said, "Nothing, nothing. I just want to be friends with you." "Bullshit." Yu Qianqiu closed his fan and pointed at his face. "Your face says that you have ulterior motives. You don't even know how to lie." No, I really don't." Xan Laosan denied again. "Fine, since you don't want to tell me the truth, then let's go our separate ways. You go your own way and I'll go my own way. We'll have nothing to do with each other in the future." Yu Qianqiu turned around and left. "Wait." Xan Laosan blocked his way and said helplessly, "I really don't want anything from you. I just want to be friends with you and invite you to Lingfang Valley as a guest." "Is it really that simple?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. He thought to himself, inviting me to Lingfang Valley is the real reason. Xan Laosan nodded sincerely and said, "It's really that simple." Yu Qianqiu looked at him in disgust. He did not believe his words at all. But he was a master in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage. For him to be so humble, he must have something to ask of him. He did not expose him as long as he knew what was going on. He smiled and said, "You want to be friends with me? Do you know that I have a lot of enemies? Aren't you afraid that I'll drag you down? What's the point of being friends if I'm afraid of this? A true friend should share blessings and difficulties together." Xen Laosen patted his chest happily. Share blessings and difficulties together? Why does it feel like there's a trap in his words? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He noticed that Xen Laosen's eyes were a little unfocused when he said this. But now he really believed that Xen Laosen wanted to be friends with him. Because the phrase share blessings and difficulties together had a profound meaning. That's a good word. I like it. I'll be friends with you. Come, let's go to my place and have a chat. Yu Qianqiu said happily. He thought to himself, let's put blessings and difficulties aside first. Let's get a bodyguard to accompany me first. This was also the reason why he came to find Xen Laosen this time. Before he left, he threw out another ingot of gold. The madam was so happy as if she had seen her own father. She kept asking them to come again next time. After returning to the embassy, Yu Qianqiu arranged for Xen Laosen to stay in a small courtyard for the time being. Xen Laosen calmly accepted the arrangement when he found that Nongzhu was not there. In the dead of night, Yu Qianqiu quietly disappeared from the room. When he reappeared, he was already in the wilderness. Chapter 504. A cold crescent moon hung in the night sky, and the stars in the sky shone brightly. In the wilderness deep in the mountains, the area that had been burned by the fire during the day was pitch black under the moonlight. In this place where the intense battle had taken place during the day, Yu Qianqiu stared at the 50 members of the special forces in front of him. Apart from their team uniforms, all of them had changed into ordinary people's clothes, revealing their original appearances. You all seem to be in good spirits. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, I still remember that when you first joined Utopia, most of you were still at the core formation stage. In just a few years, all of you have reached the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. My painstaking efforts to nurture you all weren't in vain. The 50 of them clenched their right fists in unison and bowed slightly. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, and his expression gradually turned solemn. He said in a deep voice, soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. A few days ago I asked for 50 capable members from your chief instructor, and Director Guan chose you all. I hope you won't disappoint me. We'll do our best until our last breath. The 50 of them replied in unison in a low voice. I don't want you to die. I want you to live. I want you to live and complete the mission. The hard work we put in today is so that we can live a better life in the future. This is the dream that we Utopia people have been fighting for all our lives, so I don't need you to die, Yu Qianqiu said in a calm and affectionate tone. The 50 of them clenched their fists and bowed again in excitement. Yu Qianqiu nodded in satisfaction and said, the code name for this mission is Scout Point. Do you all understand the mission's objective? Keep a low profile, the 50 of them replied softly. That's right. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, I don't need you to fight and kill. When carrying out the mission you'll be black bats in the night, trying your best to avoid being discovered by anyone. In between missions you'll be ordinary mortals in the secular world. You mustn't let anyone discover that you're cultivators. I asked Director Chen to provide you with various spirit pills, weapons, equipment, and resources. Have you gotten them? Got it. Number 50 replied again. All right. Yu Qianqiu nodded his head and said, if there's an emergency, immediately send out a distress signal. Don't force yourself. Remember, I don't need you to die. I will do my best to save each and every one of you, because each and every one of you is a member of the special forces that I have painstakingly trained. Although there will be sacrifices when there are struggles, I don't need you to make meaningless sacrifices. That would be meaningless to you, to your comrades, to the entire Utopia, or even to me. Do you understand? Understood. After the mission is completed, send a signal and I will bring you back to Utopia. Yu Qianqiu looked at the sky and nodded. According to the original plan, the mission will start from the Dayang Kingdom. Then it will be carried out according to the missions we received. Order. All 50 of them stood at attention. Yu Qianqiu said in a deep voice, the exploration operation begins now. Let's go. Long live the leader. Number 50 exclaimed softly. Then they identified the direction and quickly scattered in all directions without any hesitation. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned in a circle and watched his team disappear into the night. Some time ago he had begun to make preparations. He had continuously sent information to Guan Yu and asked Guan Yu to select the members and make a detailed plan. With the convenience of having a detailed topographic map of the various countries in his hands, the plan was quickly perfected. Only then did he name the mission Exploration. The so-called exploration operation was to send team members to infiltrate the various countries and secretly plant the teleportation points that Yu Qianqiu needed at the important locations of the various countries' cultivation worlds. For example, preparations had to be made in advance near the spirit stone mines and important places such as the various sections. As Yu Qianqiu brought back a sum of spirit stones to Utopia, there were more and more early-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators in Utopia. It was enough for him to plan a large-scale attack. However, it seemed a little unrealistic for him to rely on himself to plant teleportation points all over the various countries. Firstly, due to the accident of kidnapping Yin Wufeng and extorting Yin Baikang, his identity had been exposed. He was now too big of a target and people would probably pay attention to him wherever he went. Secondly, his cultivation was not high enough. Even if he did not expose his identity, it would still take him a lot of time to run all over the various countries. Currently, it was best to send a group of special forces to carry out the mission in secret. With more than 300 countries and 50 special forces members, it would be enough for each person to be assigned to a few countries. If there were no accidents, it would probably be completed in half a year. Of course, it would be faster to send more than 300 special forces members at once, but that would be too big of a target. At the same time, in order to prevent accidents and minimize losses, it was better to have as many capable people as possible. Moreover, some things often happened outside of the plan. He had not been here for long, so he needed to understand more. Moreover, there was another great benefit to him traveling openly in the various countries. He could clear himself of suspicion and no one would suspect him. For example, there was an accident in country A, but he was thousands of miles away in country B. Who would be able to link these two incidents to him? The next day, Zhang Peng continued to participate in his martial arts competition for a spouse, which made Baiwan Nation's contestants very depressed. With this guy around, no one had the confidence to beat him. It seemed that they had come for nothing. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, did not have the intention to go to the palace again. He did not want to watch that stupid martial arts competition. After getting to know third brother Xian, he wandered around Dayang City for the next few days. With a friend like third brother Xian, Yu Qianqiu felt that it was a good thing. Third brother Xian knew everything about the various countries, so he could ask him if he had any questions. He followed third brother Xian to visit his friends' houses. Although the others did not have a good impression of Yu Qianqiu, they still reluctantly entertained him for third brother Xian's sake. However, after visiting a few houses and learning some news, Yu Qianqiu's expression turned a little ugly, and he was no longer in the mood to stroll around. The two of them returned to Baiwan Nation's embassy. Third brother Xian's expression was also a little ugly. There was no other reason. Yu Qianqiu's actions this time had caused the various countries to lose face. Many experts had already been ordered to come and take Yu Qianqiu's life to regain their lost face. One of third brother Xian's good friends revealed that it was actually fake to regain face. In fact, cultivators from various countries had their eyes on Yu Qianqiu's two treasured sabers. Under the watchful eyes of the public, although the soul formation cultivators behind the scenes wanted to snatch the two treasured sabers, they could not openly snatch the items of the younger generation. In fact, this was also a lie. If no one knew, would the soul formation cultivators make a move? In the cultivation world, it was not uncommon to see people secretly snatching the precious chi-gathering pill. Being concerned about one's identity was just a pretense. Many soul formation cultivators had done it. Most importantly, once a soul formation cultivator made a move, the others would definitely not be polite. At that time, the soul formation cultivators from various countries would definitely fight. Therefore, they all secretly reached an agreement to send their elite disciples to take action. Whoever snatched the sabers and brought them back would own them. Fortunately, Hua Zhongming did not want his own capital, Dayang City, to suffer. He said that he would find a way to drive Yu Qianqiu out of Dayang City. The countries where the other soul formation cultivators resided also had their own capitals. Everyone put themselves in Yu Qianqiu's shoes and didn't want to break this rule. Otherwise, retribution could come to their own territories at any time. Everyone could only wait for Yu Qianqiu to leave Dayang City. Knowing that experts from various countries were rushing here and that the area outside Dayang City would soon become his death zone, it would be strange if Yu Qianqiu could be happy. It would be difficult for one or two late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators to fight. Wouldn't hundreds or thousands of them fight together? In the small courtyard, third brother XN was looking at the flower garden in the middle of the courtyard in amazement. On both sides of the flower garden were green leaves and fresh flowers. They were all alive and well, but why was the one in the middle all dead? It was really strange. Yuchencho sat on the swing, swaying back and forth. He asked weakly, "Third brother XN, are my two sabers really that enticing?" Third brother XN walked back and asked in surprise, "Don't tell me you don't know what treasure you have in your hands? When I was in Spirit Fang Valley, I heard that you held a saber drawing conference in the Chinese cultivation world. The news from there said that the two sabers in your hands are spirit treasures from the Eastern Holy Land. The soul formation cultivators here have long been ready to make a move. If it wasn't for the world's #1 expert restraining you, you would have been out of luck." Yuchencho was really speechless. At that time, in order to make more money, he said that the Black Fire Saber was a treasure from the Eastern Holy Land. Unfortunately, that conference was not a success. However, he didn't expect that the nonsense he had cooked up back then would bring him so much trouble. What made him most depressed was that although there were many people who coveted it in the Chinese cultivation world, there wasn't such a big movement. Even he himself didn't think much of it. But he didn't think that in the Chinese cultivation world, he had been flirting with the 4 big families and the #1 sect for a long time. Some sects like the Moon sect also seemed to have an ambiguous relationship with him. Those who wanted to steal the treasures didn't dare to act rashly without knowing the details. They were afraid of attracting unnecessary trouble. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been so polite to him. Actually, everyone was skeptical at first. They didn't really believe that there was a treasure from the Eastern Holy Land. But the bad thing is that you shouldn't have taken it out last time. Think about it. You, a nascent soul cultivator, almost forced a tribulation passing stage cultivator to death with just one saber. The power of this saber is obvious to everyone. Even if it's not a treasure from the Eastern Holy Land, it's still so powerful. Who wouldn't drool over it? Third Lord Xang clicked his tongue. Yuchencho looked at him and said with a frown, "You became friends with me because you took a fancy to my 2 treasured sabers, right?" Third Lord Xan shook his head. "Then you really misunderstood. To me, friends are more important than sabers." Hearing this, Yuchencho's expression showed that he was very doubtful. Third Lord Xan coughed awkwardly. "Let me put it this way. Actually, although your sabers are good in the hands of cultivators below the soul-forming stage, they won't have any effect at all. It's better to give them a better flying sword. But in the hands of a soul-forming stage cultivator, it's different. Fights between soul-forming stage cultivators usually rely on their high cultivation to fight in close combat. Long-range attacks are almost impossible to hurt because everyone's speed is unbelievably fast. Think about it, if this kind of saber fell into the hands of a soul-forming stage cultivator, it would be too useful. Chapter 505. Yuchencho agreed with this statement. He empathized with them. No matter how powerful the saber was, it was useless against those with high cultivation. If he couldn't catch up with them, he wouldn't be able to slash them. Otherwise, he could really kill them with one strike. It was indeed not as good as a flying sword. If it fell into the hands of a spirit-severing cultivator, he couldn't think of anything that could resist the sharpness of the black flame saber other than the nether iron. The key was that those ignorant spirit-severing cultivators didn't know that even if he gave it to them, it would instantly collapse into black flame once it was too far away from him. But not many people knew this secret except for his master, Nongzhu, and Zi. The 3 of them knew that his flying sword and saber were condensed from black flame. As for the others, he didn't want to reveal this secret. "Aren't your master Lingfang Valley Master, and your elder brother also at spirit-severing stage? I have 2 sabers here, one for each of them." Yuchencho pretended to ask casually. Third brother Xan scratched his head and smiled bitterly. "Your proposal is really good. If you're really willing to give it to me, I'll naturally accept it and thank you. But the premise is that you're willing and I don't think you're willing. The most important thing is that I never thought of getting my hands on your treasured saber. People from our Spirit Fang Valley don't do this kind of forceful thing. Otherwise, my master won't forgive me. If you don't believe me, I can swear to God." Yuchencho blinked his eyes. Could it be that the most beautiful woman in the world was an angel with both character and beauty? A top-grade girl? These 3 words suddenly popped up in his mind. He couldn't help but want to meet her as soon as possible. He wanted to see how beautiful the most beautiful woman in the world was to be able to bear the title of the most beautiful woman in the world. He subconsciously thought that it would be great if no one stopped Wen Lanfeng from going to the demon domain when he came out of seclusion. Otherwise he might be killed by his master. If Lu Yanqing were to lose such a flower protector, then… Yu Qianqiu was shocked by his own dirty thoughts. Speaking of the world's most beautiful woman, this world's most beautiful woman had just left the holy land of Baiwan Nation, and when Rui arrived right after her. The holy land of Baiwan country was located deep in the mountains in the hinterland of Baiwan country. Waterfalls, clear springs, birdsong, fragrant flowers, mountains and fields. It was a place rarely visited by humans, but there was a large number of pavilions and buildings hidden in it. It was the holy land of the Wen clan of Baiwan country, and also the place where the cultivators of the Wen clan cultivated. When Rui returned to the sacred land and immediately went to the valley where the patriarch was in seclusion. At the end of the valley was a stone cliff. In the middle of the cliff there was a sealed cave. At this moment the dark entrance of the cave was opened. Obviously the patriarch had broken out of the cave and really came out. At this moment, a figure suddenly teleported and appeared beside Wen Rui, who was floating in the air. This person's appearance was similar to Wen Rui's, but he was fairer. He was Wen Rui's younger brother Tang, Wen Xiu, a cultivator in the late transcending tribulation. After seeing Wen Rui he said with a smile, "Big brother, you're back. Have you seen Mr. Nongzhu?" Wen Rui didn't have time to chat with him, so he asked directly, "Where is the patriarch?" After the patriarch came out of seclusion he asked some questions. He didn't stay long and then left, saying that he had something to do. As Wen Xiu spoke he suddenly realized something and said, "Big brother, you are a step too late. Just now the Spirit Fragrance Valley Master came personally to look for the patriarch. When he saw that the patriarch was not around, he immediately left." When Rui was so angry that he didn't know what to say. He pointed at him and shouted angrily, "Didn't I tell you to stop the patriarch? Why did you let him go?" "I did. But how could I stop him?" Wen Xiu said with a bitter face. "It's over." When Rui murmured to himself with a pale face. There was no need to guess. There were only two places that the patriarch was most likely to go after coming out of seclusion: Spirit Fang Valley and the Demon Domain. The Valley Master of Spirit Fang Valley didn't meet him along the way. Needless to say, he must have gone to the Demon Domain to seek revenge on Bai Changchun. It was hard to imagine the scene of the patriarch and Bai Changchun fighting. When Rui's heart was in his throat. It didn't matter if the patriarch was defeated. The most important thing was that he came back alive. Otherwise, it was unknown how long the Baiwan nation could last in this precarious situation. The nation had been established for many years and had many enemies. The key was that no one dared to act recklessly with the patriarch. Once he was gone, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Big brother, what's wrong?" Wen Xiu asked worriedly. When Rui turned his head stiffly and said in a stern voice, "Don't you know that the patriarch is most likely going to find Bai Changchun? Why didn't you stop him with your life and wait for me to come back?" Wen Xiu paused and said, "Big brother, I know what you're worried about, but the patriarch has been in seclusion for many years. He must have the confidence to defeat Bai Changchun. Otherwise, how could he be so reckless? Big brother, I think you're worrying too much." "I hope so." When Rui sighed helplessly. He had no other choice now. With his speed, it was impossible to catch up with the patriarch. Moreover, there was a time difference, so it was even more impossible to catch up. He was afraid that by the time he arrived at the Demon Domain, the outcome would have already been decided. Now, even if he wanted to use his great cultivation to persuade the patriarch to come back, he could not get in touch without confirming the correct location. The only thing he could do now was to wait for the final result anxiously. When Lan Feng, dressed in a gray robe, was tall and slender. He was neither fat nor thin. Although his appearance was not as good as Nongzhu's, he was definitely a handsome man. The only flaw was that there was a touch of sadness between his eyebrows, and the stubble on his cheeks made him look a little decadent. In his calm and clear eyes, there was a lingering melancholy. When he looked back, the melancholy in his eyes seemed to be able to turn people into ashes. To be exact, it was soul-stirring. It was believed that this kind of eyes could attract many women. Coupled with his outstanding appearance and profound cultivation, no one knew why he couldn't attract the world's most beautiful woman, so he was so sad. When Rui and the others guessed correctly. After when Lan Feng came out of seclusion, he did go to find Bai Changchun. At this time he was flying straight through the sky, and his powerful cultivation forced out a transparent semi-arc-shaped light shield in front of him. He had already crossed the Demon Domain at a terrifying speed. In the sky above Shuntian Island in the 1,000-mile lake, a shadow crossed the sky. When Lan Feng stood quietly in the air. He stared at the island and the lake below with a complicated expression, and then slowly swept his eyes around. 100 years ago, it was here that he, who had always been proud of his cultivation, could not withstand 10 moves from his opponent. Only 10 moves? His opponent had seriously injured him. Thinking of this, a bitter smile appeared on Wen Lanfeng's face. That was the biggest mockery to him, the so-called second expert in the world. The second expert could not even withstand 10 moves from the first expert, and was seriously injured on the spot. If it were not for Nongzhu's timely rescue, he would not have been able to return to this world-famous Shantian island. 100 years of painstaking cultivation, abandoning all love and selfish thoughts, surprised even himself. He broke through the shackles of cultivation one after another, and his cultivation climbed to new heights. Looking back at his previous cultivation, it was like watching a joke. At that time he felt that it would be difficult for his cultivation to break through again. He did not expect that Bai Changchun's lesson would give him such a great benefit. He was confident that his current cultivation was worlds apart from that time. If he continued to cultivate in that state, in less than 100 years, his seven-soul hero would merge back into his life soul, and he would be able to ascend to the immortal realm. This was a legend that had not been seen in the cultivation world for many years. However, Wen Lanfeng did not want to ascend to the immortal realm now. He had worries in his heart, and he did not want to become an immortal. As long as he defeated Bai Changchun, he could be with the person he loved. In his opinion, what was the point of becoming an immortal? It was better to stay with the person he loved for a long time. Wen Lanfeng could not help but smile when he thought of his vision of staying with Lu Yanqing. Bai Changchun's life was coming to an end, and he had not been able to ascend to the immortal realm. He must have encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation. He had already broken through that bottleneck, and he only needed to merge his seven-soul hero and life soul before he could ascend. However, he was suppressing his desire to merge with Bai Changchun, which meant that Bai Changchun was no match for him. The position of the world's #1 expert should be replaced. But I have no interest in the empty title of the world's #1 expert. I only want to be with Yanqing. Bai Changchun, you spared my life back then and I will spare your life now. Wen Lanfeng thought. Wen Lanfeng felt a little strange. Could it be that his cultivation was so high that Bai Changchun did not notice his arrival? Or was Bai Changchun not on the island at all? He swept his gaze across the island and saw a woman in white tending to the flowers and plants on the island. He could tell at a glance that she was a plant spirit. In another open space, a woman in purple was jumping around crazily, and her movements were very strange. He did not expect to see 2 more women on Shantian Island. That seemed to be Nongzhu's disciple, Zi. Was Nongzhu also on the island? Wen Lanfeng recognized Zi. Zi, is that you? Wen Lanfeng called out softly. Who called me? Zi, who was drenched in sweat, stopped her posture and looked around. Her gaze finally fell on a figure floating quietly in the air. When she saw who it was, her mouth turned into a cute circle. Lady Mu also noticed the visitor in the air. Zi calmed herself down and flew into the air in a flash. After confirming that it was Wen Lanfeng, she stammered in disbelief. Senior Wen, why are you here? She really did not dare to believe that Wen Lanfeng would come here. This was the place where he was once humiliated. Could it be that he came here with Senior Bai? Zi had vaguely guessed that possibility. Why can't I come? Wen Lanfeng smiled confidently and said, since you are here, your master must be here too. Where are they? He looked around again. Chapter 506. Seeing that Zi knew him, Miss Mu thought that Zi was also a friend of the punishment envoy, so she went back to her work. My master left. He's not in the demon region, Zi said anxiously. She was afraid that things were not as she thought. Both of them were her master's friends, and she did not want anything to happen to either of them. Hey, Nongzhu actually left you alone on Shantian Island? Wen Lanfeng frowned and said, Bai Changchun is not here either. Where did he go? Senior Bai and ancestor Nanming just left, Zi said, biting her lips. Nanming is also here? Did Bai Changchun invite Nanming here to refine the treasure? Wen Lanfeng frowned. It seemed that he had come at the wrong time, so he asked, Zi, are they refining the treasure in the demon region? I don't know, I think so. Zi replied obediently. This person was not only a friend of her master, but also a top master in the cultivation world, ranking just below Senior Bai, so she was a little afraid. Since he just left, he should not have started refining, so he won't disturb Bai Changchun's business. Wen Lanfeng nodded and said to himself. He was quite self-aware, afraid that he would accidentally ruin Bai Changchun's business by rushing here. Ziyi asked cautiously, Senior Wen, are you going to duel with Senior Bai? It's not a duel, just a competition. I'll leave after the competition. I won't disturb his business. Wen Lanfeng said this confidently, implying that he only wanted to challenge Bai Changchun, and that he would leave after defeating him. It would not hurt him. His figure rose again, and from dozens of meters to hundreds of meters above the lake, he said loudly, Bai Changchun, time flies and we haven't met for 100 years. When Lanfeng has come to visit you recklessly, please come out for a while. He spoke politely and softly, but Ziyi and Miss Mu could clearly hear Wen Lanfeng's voice from all directions, and even the echoes from afar were of the same volume, so they could not tell where the voice came from. It was just this one sentence. The voices stacked on top of each other, echoing for a long time. It was as if people were saying the same thing over and over again. The sound spread out like waves, spreading far and wide. It was unknown how far it had traveled. Wherever the voice reached, all the demons and ghosts fell silent, looking in the direction of the obedient island with fear in their eyes. The voice didn't sound like much, but both the Demon King and the Ghost King knew that it was impossible to transmit such a soft voice so far without a shocking cultivation base. At the very least they couldn't do it. Ziyi secretly clicked her tongue. As expected of the second strongest expert in the world. Just by revealing a bit of his strength, he was able to use methods that shocked the world. Madame Mu, on the other hand, shuddered subconsciously. She thought that not only was this torture envoy formidable, even his friends had unfathomable cultivation base. Within the array that sealed the blue flames beneath Twilight Valley, the blue flames released dazzling azure hues. Bai Changchun shook out a pile of rare items he had collected over the years. Grandmaster Nanming squatted on the ground and fiddled with them as he said, refine these items to their purest state. After the next green fire erupts, when the fire is at its most stable state, we can fuse them and refine them. Bai Changchun nodded. 2 days from now should be the day the blue fire erupts. 3 days from now we can begin the refinement. Nanming, when the time comes, I'll be counting on you. Don't say it's too early. The chances of a high-quality spirit treasure being refined into a treasure are extremely low. I'm worried that it will be like last time, refining a high-quality spirit treasure into a defective one. Just don't blame me when the time comes, the Nanming ancestor said with a bitter smile. Feel free to refine it. The gains and losses are the will of the heavens. I won't force it, Bai Changchun calmly said. This blue fire is a good thing. If only my Shenshen Island had it. The Nanming ancestor sighed. Then he suddenly thought of something and asked, Bai Changchun, I remember that you used to have an intermediate-grade spirit treasure sword. Was it not enough for you? I don't think I saw you take it out last time in the Eastern Sea. There probably isn't anyone in the cultivation world that can make you draw your sword, right? There aren't any in the cultivation world, but it doesn't mean that there aren't any in the Holy East lands, Bai Changchun said slowly. The Nanming ancestor shook his head. He didn't know what to say. Who knew that Bai Changchun would add, when my cultivation broke through to the late stage of soul formation, I wanted to test my cultivation. Who knew that the intermediate-grade spirit treasure couldn't withstand my full power and instantly shattered into pieces. That's why I asked you to refine a superior-grade spirit treasure. I hope it can withstand the full power of my cultivation. What? The Nanming ancestor exclaimed. The intermediate-grade spirit treasure couldn't withstand the power of his cultivation. He asked in shock, Oh my God. An inferior-grade spirit treasure should be able to withstand the use of a late-stage soul formation cultivator. But the intermediate-grade spirit treasure can't withstand your cultivation. This. Bai Changchun, you're still a late-stage soul formation cultivator? I don't know either. That's why I want to go to the Holy East lands to prove it. I want to figure out what's going on. Bai Changchun also smiled bitterly. He then waved his hand and said, Let's not talk about this. Let's hurry. Otherwise, the green fire will be unstable in 2 days and we'll have to postpone it again. The Nanming ancestor shook his head and calmed his mind. Then he raised his arms and the 12 rare materials in front of him flew up. But at this moment his and Bai Changchun's expressions changed at the same time. Both of them seemed to have heard something. The Nanming ancestor raised his hand and put away the materials. He turned around and said in surprise, Wen Lanfeng? What is he doing here? Bai Changchun snorted coldly. He turned around and passed through the wall of light that sealed the green fire. The Nanming ancestor didn't say anything. He raised his hand and put all the materials into his storage bag. Then he also rushed out. There were not many opportunities to see the world's number 1 expert and number 2 expert meet, not to mention they were enemies. In the distant sky, Nongzhu hurriedly dragged Furong and flew deep into the demon ghost region. If it weren't for Furong, he would have reached Shuntian Island by now. However, just as he saw the bright surface of the 1,000-mile lake in the distance, he suddenly heard a burst of sound. Nongzhu's expression changed drastically. He said hatefully, "Damn Wenlanfeng, you still came here. Is it worth it for a woman?" He then raised his speed to the extreme. After shouting, Wenlanfeng looked at Ziyi with a smile and stood quietly in the air, waiting for Bai Changchun's arrival. After waiting for a while, Wenlanfeng seemed to find something wrong with Ziyi's eyes. Her mouth was slightly open in surprise. Her eyes seemed to be focused behind him. The woman in white on the island was also looking in his direction in a daze. "There's someone behind me." This was Wenlanfeng's instant thought, but he immediately denied it. With his current cultivation, it was impossible for someone to be behind him without him noticing. But his intuition told him that someone was staring at him from behind. For people who had reached his level of cultivation, sometimes his intuition was better than his eyes. A chilling feeling made his scalp tingle. He really didn't want to believe it was true. "What's the matter?" A short voice sounded behind him. Wenlanfeng heard the voice that he hadn't heard for a long time, the voice that he would remember for the rest of his life. Bai Changchun's voice. Wenlanfeng's pupils suddenly shrank, and then gradually returned to normal. Maybe he was careless, or maybe Bai Changchun had cultivated some mysterious body movement that could approach people silently. But one thing was undeniable. If Bai Changchun had sneakily attacked him just now, the consequences would be really hard to predict. But Bai Changchun would definitely not do that, otherwise he would not be Bai Changchun. He was too proud and always defeated his opponents in a fair and square manner. He disdained to do despicable things. Wenlanfeng floated in the air and turned around, staring at the old man who was still hale and hearty, standing with his hands behind his back. He still looked as if he had weathered many hardships, but the older he got, the more spirited he became. He was like a green pine standing on the top of a mountain, drifting in the wind and clouds, looking down on the world, immortal. Lady Mu, who was on the island, felt that something was wrong. If this person was really friends with the punishment enforcer, it would be too strange to meet in such an atmosphere. Ziyi clutched her clothes so tightly that her knuckles turned white. If these two peerless masters were to fight, the consequences would be really hard to imagine. Should I hide further away? Wenlanfeng felt a little numb from his mouth to his throat. He wanted to speak but couldn't. He found that his confidence completely collapsed the moment he saw Bai Changchun with his own eyes. That feeling was indescribable. It was like the first time he broke into the demon domain and saw Bai Changchun. Yes, it was the same feeling. Bai Changchun was clearly in front of him, standing opposite him and looking at him expressionlessly. But the feeling he gave him was as if he was a part of heaven and earth. He just stood there casually and naturally blended into heaven and earth. It was as if he could move the world with just a lift of his hand. In contrast, he was the myriad of living beings in this world, and he was the entire world, always accommodating him. This feeling was like a dream or an illusion. The person in front of him was close at hand. He was real and ethereal, making him unfathomable. It was a terrifying thing to feel this kind of invisible pressure from the opponent when they were facing each other. In fact, the opponent didn't give him any pressure at all, but he felt as if he was shouldering the pressure of the entire world. Wenlanfeng understood that this was a kind of momentum. But he couldn't understand why he felt this way when he faced Bai Changchun back then. But now, his cultivation was worlds apart from that time. Could it be that he couldn't see through his momentum? How could this be? Wenlanfeng asked himself. He had already reached the critical point where he could fuse the 7 spirits into his life soul and ascend, but Bai Changchun was still delaying. His cultivation should have already surpassed him, but why was he still like an ant that couldn't see through him? Could it be that he had also reached this realm? Then why did he receive news that he was going to the East Holy Land to seek a breakthrough? The fact that the Nanming ancestor came here to forge a weapon for him was a very good proof. Chapter 507. Ancestor Nanming came slowly, glanced at the two people standing opposite each other, and shook his head slightly. Based on his relationship with them, he did not have the right to stop them. Glancing at Ziyi, who was staring with her head raised, Ancestor Nanming flashed over and directly banged his head on Ziyi's head, reprimanding her. "Are you tired of living? This is an adult's matter. Why are you here, little girl?" Although he and Nongzhu were entangled, they were still friends. Although he could not control Bai Changchun and Wenlanfeng, he still had to control Ziyi. Ziyi rubbed her head and cried in pain, but Ancestor Nanming dragged her down and threw her back to Shantian Island. Below, an old man and two women stared at the scene with wide eyes. "What do you want from me?" Bai Changchun asked the same question again. His tone was indifferent, without worry, fear, anxiety, or impatience, without the slightest emotion. His voice was ordinary and ordinary, like an ordinary old man asking a question, unlike Wen Lanfeng who could casually stir up an echo between heaven and earth. A trace of bitterness appeared on Wen Lanfeng's face. From Bai Changchun's words and eyes, he could see that he was arrogant and did not take him seriously at all. This courage alone was not something an ordinary person could have. He was indeed the world's #1 expert. Wen Lanfeng's momentum was already slightly inferior. "Bai Changchun, the battle that year made me reflect on the painful experience, and I cultivated in seclusion for 100 years. Today I come." Before Wen Lanfeng could finish, he heard someone shouting in the distance, "Old Bai, Wen Lanfeng, let's talk it out, let's talk it out." Nongzhu saw the two people confronting each other in midair from afar. Seeing that they had not started fighting, she hurriedly shouted, "Oh my God! This trip didn't tire me to death and I finally made it." Nongzhu inserted herself between the two people and said in a somewhat dispirited manner. It seemed that she had indeed used all her strength to fly all the way here, and the genuine vitality in her body was greatly consumed. In the mysterious wave-light ball in his hand, Hibiscus was like an imprisoned kitten, looking at Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng pitifully. The unperturbed Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng both looked at the people he brought with him in surprise. They were puzzled. Why did this guy catch a woman? Ancestor Nanming also flashed into the air when he saw Nongzhu coming. He glanced at Hibiscus and asked Nongzhu, "Nongzhu, are you acting like a playboy again? Shut your stinky mouth." Nongzhu then added, "Will you die if you don't watch the fun? Don't you know how to persuade him?" He seemed to be blaming Ancestor Nanming for not coming out to mediate. Ancestor opened his mouth but did not know what to say. Nongzhu to Hibiscus, Hibiscus and Hibiscus. The few old fellows were just about to discuss business when they heard Z exclaim, "Ah! Farong, why are you here?" "Hibiscus. Z, why are you here?" Hibiscus said in surprise. When they were on supporting Immortal Island, Yu Qianqiu had brought Zi over once. The two of them knew each other and knew that the other had a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. The two women threw everything to the back of their minds and started chatting. The tense atmosphere between the two great experts of the world, which was on the verge of breaking out, was instantly destroyed by these two girls. Ancestor Nanming elbowed Nongzhu and asked, "Hey, who is this Hibiscus?" Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng could not remember whose daughter Farong was. Nongzhu would not bring an ordinary person to Shantian Island. However, the two of them didn't know that Hibiscus was just a small disciple of supporting Immortal Island. Given their status, who would care about a mere Fuxian Island? Moreover, he was just a disciple on the island. Naturally, he wouldn't remember who Hibiscus was. Damn it! Don't get touchy. How am I supposed to know? Nongzhu retracted his elbow and stared at the two girls. He had raised Ziyi since she was young. He was her father, her mother, and her master. In short, Ziyi grew up in the purple bamboo forest and never had a friend, let alone a close friend. When he saw Ziyi and Hibiscus chattering happily, he suddenly realized that he was wrong, very wrong. Nonsense. Ancestor Nanming pointed below and questioned, "If you don't know who she is, how can you bring her here? If you don't know who she is, how can she know Ziyi? Who are you trying to fool?" "How would I know? Yu Qianqiu didn't tell me." Nongzhu was also a little gloomy. Hearing that it was related to his disciple, Bai Changchun looked over and asked, "Nongzhu, what's going on?" Nongzhu was stunned and then said with a smile, "Yu Qianqiu said that this girl is his woman. He said that it would be dangerous if she followed him, so he asked me to bring her here to avoid the danger." Bai Changchun and Ancestor Nanming were stunned at the same time. They stared at Hibiscus and sized her up. Wen Lanfeng's head was filled with bewilderment, but he was quite surprised. He thought to himself, who is Yu Qianqiu? How come I've never heard of him? He must be an extraordinary person to be able to make Nongzhu run errands and make Bai Changchun and Ancestor Nanming lose their composure. He had been in closed-door training for 100 years and Yu Qianqiu's previous life wasn't even born yet. How could he know who Yu Qianqiu was? It was enough for him to think about it slowly. Among the 4 people in the sky, 3 of them were the 4 great men of the cultivation world. They were only missing Lu Yanqing from Lingfang Valley. Ever since Ziyi and Yu Qianqiu toured the world of sensual pleasures, she was a little wild. Being trapped in Shantian Island was boring, so she practiced the awkward, animal play, every day to kill time. Hibiscus's arrival made her a little too excited. Finally she had a companion. Yu Qianqiu is too much. He brought you out to play but he didn't bring me along. It's so dangerous outside. What's there to be afraid of? Danger is fun. If there's no danger, why would I go out with that guy? As Ziyi said this, Nongzhu's face immediately turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Ancestor Nanming, who was at the side, looked at her and laughed. He thought that this girl was really funny and could compete with her master. It's really dangerous. It's not fun. Last time Yu Qianqiu was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. I was scared to death. Yu Qianqiu was beaten to the point of vomiting blood? It can't be. That guy is very bad. Who can injure him? Is he okay? As soon as these two sentences were spoken, a somewhat oppressive aura filled the air. The breeze blowing around them instantly stopped. As the two girls spoke, they also felt that something was wrong. When they suddenly turned around, they suddenly found that the four experts in the sky were staring at them. Ziyi stuck out her tongue. The two girls shrunk in embarrassment and did not dare to say another word. What a strong aura. When Lanfeng's pupils shrank. She slowly turned to look at Bai Changchun. She thought that he was going to fight, but she found that he was staring at Nongzhu. Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming looked at each other, then secretly turned their heads to look back. Nongzhu found that Bai Changchun was staring at her and could not help but smile awkwardly. Bai Changchun indifferently asked word by word, Nongzhu, who hurt you Qianqiu? Old Bai, don't think about it. His skin is rough and his flesh is thick. He has already recovered from a minor injury. Nongzhu said and shook her head with a bitter smile. She said, in fact that guy asked for it. He claimed to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. It would be strange if people did not find trouble with him. I'll tell you in detail later. The aura of fear disappeared in an instant. Bai Changchun was stunned. He claimed to be the world's #1 expert, but his disciple ran out and claimed to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. If people knew that she was his disciple, it would really make him proud. When Lanfeng could not help asking, Nongzhu, who is this Yu Qianqiu? Why have I never heard of him? Nongzhu smiled and raised her chin toward Bai Changchun. She said, his last disciple. When Lanfeng uttered an ah and then hesitated. A famous master produces a brilliant disciple. No wonder he dares to claim to be the world's #1 expert below the deification stage. He must be worthy of it. Although it was a perfunctory compliment, it sounded a little harsh. Bai Changchun's calm face was slightly dark. It seemed that he felt ashamed for the first time in his long life. Nongzhu secretly thought, when Lanfeng, you really want to die. Aren't you being sarcastic? Sure enough, after Bai Changchun's face calmed down, he stared at Wen Lanfeng indifferently and said, from what you said before, do you mean that after 100 years of closed-door training, your cultivation has greatly improved and you came here to wash away your shame? Who was Wen Lanfeng? He was not a coward who was afraid to fight. He was provoked by Bai Changchun's words on the spot and his previous worries were immediately thrown out of the window. This was the true arrogance of a top expert. He would never retreat in the face of a battle and would only concentrate on one thing, to defeat his opponent. Life or death, victory or defeat, these were things to be considered after the battle. When Lanfeng laughed heartily and replied in a sonorous voice, the battle 100 years ago, Wen Lanfeng will never forget it. The 100 years of closed-door training is just to be qualified to meet the punishment master of the Demon Ghost region again. Today, I would like to experience the demeanor of the world's #1 expert again. The last sentence was particularly impassioned. Don't get excited, don't get excited. Nongzhu waved her hand anxiously between the two. However, both of them had entered a state of high spirits and simply ignored Nongzhu. When Lanfeng's whole body erupted with a strong fighting spirit. His grayish-white robe suddenly fluttered despite the absence of wind, stirring the surrounding airflow to gradually solidify and appear like blades. Ancestor Nanming quickly released a transparent protective upstanding chi, but unexpectedly, he still felt a little overwhelmed. The wind blades constantly made ear-piercing sounds on the upstanding chi, and the entire protective upstanding chi could be destroyed by the wind blades at any time. This was the turbulence caused by the light chi ji before they started fighting. What would happen if they started fighting? Ancestor Nanming's eyes were full of horror. Wen Lanfeng was indeed worthy of his reputation as the world's second expert, but he did not expect him to be so powerful. It was far beyond his understanding of experts in the late stage of the incarnation realm. Without another word, Ancestor Nanming retreated in the face of difficulties. This was not a place where he could stay with his cultivation, so he quickly flashed back to the island. Nongzhu also had a protective upstanding qi, but her cultivation was obviously higher than ancestor Nanming's. She shouted, "You two lunatics! There is no deep hatred between you two. Will you only be satisfied when you fight to the death? Get out of the way!" Wen Lanfeng shouted. His qi-ji locked onto Nongzhu, and the dancing wind blades immediately swept over, cutting Nongzhu's protective upstanding qi to the point that it almost collapsed. Nongzhu immediately felt that she could not take it anymore and she shouted, "You two lunatics, just die. You're making me worry less." As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly fled and was forced to leave. Bai Changchun, who was opposite Wen Lanfeng, was very quiet. His expression was indifferent, so quiet that it was a little ridiculous. He did not make as much noise as Wen Lanfeng. His clothes, beard, and hair did not even move in the chaotic wind. Wen Lanfeng's eyes were bright as he stared at Bai Changchun. The wind blades crazily swept towards Bai Changchun, but when they were 2 meters away from his body, the wind blades silently and inexplicably collapsed and disappeared. They had no effect on Bai Changchun. The few people on the island stared at him and Lady Mu bit her lip. She already knew what was going to happen. She did not expect that she would have the opportunity to see the torture envoy, who was famous in the demon domain, in action. She did not know who the other person was, but he actually dared to challenge the torture envoy. "It seems that you've really made a lot of progress in the past 100 years of hard cultivation. You can't be compared to the past. No wonder you have the confidence to come to me," Bai Changchun said lightly. "I also feel that I've made a lot of progress." Wen Lanfeng nodded and asked, "How do I compare to you? I don't know my own cultivation level, and I've been looking forward to someone who can help me understand myself. After seeing you." Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said, "What a pity. The person who can help me understand is not you. You don't even know what level your cultivation has reached." Wen Lanfeng laughed and said, "I understand now. You mean that I'm still not your opponent?" Bai Changchun said, "It doesn't matter whether you're my opponent or not. The most important thing is that you must remember one thing." "What thing?" Wen Lanfeng asked. "Cultivators above the soul formation stage who trespasses the demon domain will die," Bai Changchun said lightly. "Ah." Wen Lanfeng laughed and waved his hand. A cold light flashed out of his storage bag, and a wide long sword appeared in front of him. The blade was as wide as a palm, and there was a flowing mercury-like luster on its surface. Wen Lanfeng gently grabbed the hilt and said, "My giant silver sword failed to force your sword out, and it has been sealed until now. If you can force my sword out, I'll spare your life," Bai Changchun said quietly. "Ah." Wen Lanfeng laughed wildly and said, "Bai Changchun, you're too conceited. Today, unless you're an immortal from the upper realm, I'll make you understand the bottom line of your cultivation level." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, there were thousands of Wen Lanfeng and thousands of giant silver swords in the air, standing above Bai Changchun's head. It was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. The surrounding airflow was dead silent. On Obedient Island, Nongzhu and elder ancestor of Nanming looked at each other. The two women were stunned. They had seen people who could create many phantoms, but at this time, the thousands of Wen Lanfeng in the air were motionless as if they were real bodies. They moved. One of the thousands of Wen Lanfeng moved, and with a dazzling silver light, it drew a gorgeous and charming arc. From top to bottom, the sword came from the west, fast as lightning, and slashed toward Bai Changchun's head. Just as the sword was about to touch Bai Changchun, a third hand seemed to grow out of Bai Changchun's body, and his fingers were like picking flowers. Chapter 508. With a ding sound, it hit the side of the sword's edge and the man and the sword disappeared without a trace. It was just a soft and crisp sound, without any great power that could shake people's hearts. Not even the sound of wind could be heard. However, it made people feel that everything in that space was still except for the two people fighting. The sound, light, and airflow gave people a feeling that they had been frozen. Hibiscus's cultivation was too low, so she couldn't see any clues. She was already dumbfounded when she saw the thousands of Wen Lanfeng's incarnations. Zi opened her mouth. According to her understanding, there could only be one real Wen Lanfeng among the thousands of incarnations, and the others were all phantoms. But how could phantoms turn into a tangible form and carry out a substantial attack? Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming understood that this seemingly peaceful place was extremely dangerous. The two of them restrained all of their great power and didn't waste any of it. All of their power was gathered between the sword and the finger. There were not many people in this world who could withstand this sword and finger. They moved again. A sword came from the south, followed by a sword from the east, and then from the north, south, east, and west. When Lanfeng's attacks were as dense as rain, one man and one sword were like flying immortals from the heavens, leaving behind a shadow. They abandoned all magnificence and only pursued a simple fatal blow. One man and one sword, only one sword, without any extra movements. One man and one sword's fatal blow was simple and unadorned, but when thousands of people and one sword's fatal blows fused together, it formed the most gorgeous visual shock. Thousands of Wenlan Feng, thousands of huge silver swords and thousands of silver electric shadows interweaved in the air to form a huge, gorgeous silver lotus in full bloom. Thousands of attacks in the end, all focused on the flower's stem, and by Changchun was the white lotus stem that suffered the storm-like attacks. What a beautiful, blooming white lotus! Hibiscus was stunned. She never thought that cultivators could fight in this way. Zi was stunned. It was too spectacular. This was the fight between the world's #1 expert and the world's #2 expert. Lady Mu was afraid that the torturer couldn't withstand such an attack. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming stared at their every move without blinking their eyes. Bai Changchun's expression was calm. With his hands behind his back, he remained motionless like a mountain, withstanding the thousands of attacks in the sky. Thousands of arms also appeared on his shoulders, making him look like the thousand-armed Guanyin. It was extremely beautiful. Ding ding ding. A series of rapid and crisp sounds rang out. Every finger would hit its target, and every single one of them was able to thwart the sharpness of the giant silver sword. With a flick of his finger, when Lanfeng's body and sword unity collapsed. In the blink of an eye, the silver lotus gradually dissipated in the air. It was a magnificent opening, but a depressing curtain call. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanmian heaved a sigh of relief. If when Lanfeng's 1,000 swords unite was used on them, they would not be able to withstand 100 swords if they did not escape, let alone 1,000 swords. It seemed that only a person with an abnormally high cultivation like Bai Changchun could remain still like a mountain and deal with it with ease. Moreover, he didn't even draw his weapon and merely flicked his finger lightly to break when Lanfeng's 1,000 swords as one. His finger avoided the sharpness and flicked the side of the sword tip. It would be fine if it was just one or two, but it happened that thousands of swords burst out almost at the same time. There was probably no one in the world who could compare to him in terms of eyesight. Although the two were relieved, they knew that this was just the beginning of the warm-up, and the real fight was yet to come. Bai Changchun is indeed Bai Changchun. I can't believe that my 1,000 swords unite couldn't even force you to move a step. When Lanfeng's sigh sounded around, but only his voice could be heard. I don't have time to chat with you. If you don't make a move, I will. Bai Changchun said calmly. Good. Then come on. Let me experience the power of the world's #1 master again. When Lanfeng's voice was still heard, but no one else could be seen. You overestimate yourself. Bai Changchun snorted coldly. His figure flickered and he also disappeared. The few people on the island looked around but found nothing. Suddenly, a series of rapid bangs sounded high up in the sky. They quickly looked up, and when the last bang sounded, they saw Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng appear above at the same time. The two had obviously fought several times in a race of speed. Otherwise, there would have been no sound for no reason. The two were so fast that the people below couldn't see them clearly. A muffled groan sounded in the air. Wen Lanfeng's figure seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. He fell like a meteor and quickly fell to the surface of the 1,000-mile lake. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming exchanged a surprised look. They could see that Wen Lanfeng was injured, but they didn't know what Bai Changchun had done to him. Whoosh! Bai Changchun's figure appeared intermittently from high up in the sky. This was not teleportation but a pure speed pursuit. He chased after Wen Lanfeng. At their level of cultivation, it was impossible to cause effective damage to their opponents from afar. They needed to hit them head-on. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming's hearts were in their throats. Although Bai Changchun had injured Wen Lanfeng, he obviously didn't want to let Wen Lanfeng go and was chasing him. Sword without an arrow. Wen Lanfeng, who was falling rapidly, shouted and stopped in the air due to the strong inertia. The strong wind brought by his fall pressed a huge arc of deep whirlpool on the surface of the lake that was only a few dozen meters away from him. As the deep whirlpool bounced up, Wen Lanfeng, who had stopped, also bounced up and roared into the sky. The sword in his hand produced a giant sword aura that was more than 20 meters long. It stirred up huge chaotic sword shadows, like messy transparent thorns shooting through the air, madly stabbing at Bai Changchun who was chasing after him. The two powerhouses brazenly confronted each other head-on. However, Bai Changchun seemed to have fallen into a pile of crystal-clear thorns. Clang clang clang. The fight directly entered a white-hot stage. This was the last scene that the women in purple clothes saw clearly. Then, the figures of the two peerless powerhouses became blurred again. With the cultivation of the three women, they could no longer see clearly. They could only see the messy and terrifying sword aura sweeping everywhere. Bang bang. The sound of banging was endless. Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming's eyes almost narrowed into slits. They stared at the two people fighting with sparkling eyes. They knew that Bai Changchun did not want to destroy his territory, so he deliberately suppressed his destructive aura. Wen Lanfeng was not here to cause trouble. At the same time, in order not to show weakness, he also suppressed his destructive aura. Otherwise, with such a crazy fight between the two people, the power emitted was earth-shattering, and the shocking and terrifying shock wave alone could completely destroy Abedian Island. They could not just stand on the island and watch the show as if nothing had happened. TSK. Wen Lanfeng's cultivation has really improved by leaps and bounds. In the past, it would be impossible for him to fight against old Bai so valiantly. How strong! Nongzhu exclaimed. Ancestor Nanming glanced at him, knowing that he had seen the battle 100 years ago. His gaze returned to the two people fighting. The more Wen Lanfeng fought, the stronger his fighting spirit became. The defeat 100 years ago was so sullen that he almost did not have the strength to fight back and was beaten half to death. He had never had the opportunity to fight with an expert like Bai Changchun so happily. With the giant silver in hand, the sword moved with his heart. His entire body and mind were completely integrated with the sword, achieving the true unity of man and sword that he dreamed of. The sword was him and he was the sword. With the unity of man and sword, he was invincible. Fighting against the world's #1 expert, his fighting spirit and heroic spirit soared to the sky. Wen Lanfeng was secretly amazed. It was a great blessing to be able to fight with an expert like Bai Changchun. It directly stimulated his potential. The shackles between man and sword were broken in an instant. The sword in his hand burst forth with infinite possibilities at will. I don't believe I can't force you to use your sword. Wen Lanfeng's fighting spirit soared. He exerted force again and trapped Bai Changchun in a net of sword gang. The two fighting figures became more and more blurred, and even the huge sword gang was flickering. The sky and the earth were suddenly, up and down, left and right, and loud noises were constantly heard. Hiss. Ancestor Nanming felt a toothache and his eyes were almost blurred. He gasped and rubbed his face with both hands. He said excitedly, "This trip is not in vain, not in vain. Wen Lanfeng is really amazing. He can actually fight with Bai Changchun to this extent." Nongzhu rubbed her blurred eyes and said suspiciously, "Why do I feel that something is wrong?" She then turned around and asked, "Nanming, if I remember correctly, the giant silver in Wen Lanfeng's hand should be a middle-grade spiritual treasure. Do you think a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword can trap Bai Changchun?" He and Bai Changchun were good friends. He knew that Bai Changchun once had a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword, but it collapsed because it could not withstand his strong cultivation. In other words, a middle-grade spiritual treasure could not withstand Bai Changchun's power at all. But how could he be trapped by a middle-grade spiritual treasure sword? Ancestor Nanming was slightly stunned. He happened to hear Bai Changchun mention this before. Now that he thought about it, it was indeed not right. He said in a muffled voice, "Maybe Wen Lanfeng's cultivation is profound, and he can exert the power of the giant silver sword to a higher level?" Nongzhu shook her head slightly, feeling that this explanation was still a bit unreliable. From the fight just now, when Lanfeng was injured by Bai Changchun, it could be seen that the former was obviously not a match for the latter, and the gap was not just a little bit. It was a bit of a joke to think that such a gap could trap the opponent with just the sword gang. Nongzhu murmured, holding her chin, "What is old Bai doing? Is he deliberately letting him win?" It was not that he was letting Wen Lanfeng win, but Bai Changchun was getting more and more excited as the fight went on. He did not want to defeat Wen Lanfeng so quickly. He had fought countless times in the cultivation world, and he had seen all kinds of opponents. However, just now he suddenly found that Wen Lanfeng seemed to have understood something. Facing the sword moves that he was barely supporting, Wen Lanfeng suddenly became at ease. This fellow actually broke through another shackle in this life and death struggle. And he immediately integrated it seamlessly. Bai Changchun secretly marveled that this guy was really a rare genius in the world. No wonder his cultivation could advance by leaps and bounds in just 100 years of closed-door training. What a pity. If he was not so infatuated, his achievements in the future would be limitless. Chapter 509. Bai Changchun shuttled through the sword energy like a phantom, looking forward to another surprise from Wen Lanfeng. However, after a long while, Wen Lanfeng only pressed harder and harder. The surprise he expected did not appear again. Bai Changchun sighed inwardly. It had been a long time since he met an opponent who could satisfy him. It seemed that his expectations were a little too high. With his disappointment, Wen Lanfeng suddenly felt that he could not bear it. Wen Lanfeng sadly realized that he had overestimated himself. Bai Changchun kept dodging not because he was forced to the point that he had no time to make a move, but because he had not made a move all along. It seemed that he was waiting for Wen Lanfeng to unleash his greatest potential. Perhaps he saw that Wen Lanfeng was only this good, so he lost interest in dawdling and began to counterattack. Bai Changchun's hands, which were originally behind his back, stretched out one of them and drew an ethereal and unfathomable shadow. Clang, clang. The sword energy that was like a wild forest could no longer be freely wielded. Bai Changchun shuttled back and forth as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. From time to time, his two fingers would point at the smooth side of the sword energy that swept past, making a series of clanging sounds. Wen Lanfeng suddenly felt his arms go numb. The sword energy that he wielded seemed to have encountered a heavy resistance, and its speed gradually slowed down. The two people, who were originally so fast that they were like blurry shadows, gradually revealed their true bodies in the air. Even the women in purple could see their every move. Oh no! Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming exclaimed in unison. They could finally be sure that Bai Changchun had been holding back just now. Once he made a move, Wen Lanfeng would not be able to resist. Not to mention Nongzhu, even Ancestor Nanming knew Bai Changchun's temper more or less. Since this guy had decided to go all out, Wen Lanfeng would probably be in danger. Just as Nongzhu and Ancestor Nanming were on tenterhooks, a shocking scene appeared. The huge sword energy was no longer entangled with Bai Changchun and was retracted. Even though Bai Changchun was just casually pointing here and there, Wen Lanfeng really felt that she couldn't take it anymore. If she continued to waste time, she would definitely be exhausted. Wen Lanfeng retracted the huge sword and held the hilt with both hands. With a ah sound, he quickly slashed at Bai Changchun, giving him a solid blow. The speed and power of this sword naturally didn't need to be said. It had already brought with it the rumbling sound of wind and thunder. Bai Changchun stood quietly in the air, not dodging or evading. The others were shocked. Umph. He let out a cold snort that sounded like a vajra subduing a demon. His tone was full of extreme disdain. This cold snort was simply a great humiliation to Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng was filled with grief and indignation, but he had nowhere to vent it. He immediately exerted all his cultivation and infused it into the sword that he slashed out, determined to succeed in one strike. The huge energy sword that howled like thunder launched a thunderous strike with the force to split the heavens and earth. Just as the sword was about to reach his head, Bai Changchun stretched out his hand again. No one saw when he stretched out his hand. The howling came to an abrupt halt. The huge energy sword did not move. It was not moving, but it could not move. Bai Changchun stretched out two fingers and firmly clamped down on the blade, causing Wen Lanfeng's all-out strike to be unable to advance even half a step further. His thunderous rage was quelled with just a lift of his hand. Wen Lanfeng pressed on the sword with both hands. His face was red from holding back. Bai Changchun was dressed in a light green robe. His thin face was expressionless. He had one hand behind his back while the other hand clamped down on the huge blade with two fingers. This was the scene in the air. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker at a glance. The spectators did not even dare to breathe loudly. This scene was deeply imprinted in their minds. Hibiscus's mouth was so wide that an egg could be stuffed in it. Her mind was completely blank. Zi crossed her hands in front of her chest. Her eyes were filled with little stars. As expected of Senior Bai, who I've admired since childhood. He's too perfect. Lady Mu bowed slightly in respect. The demon region's torturer was naturally invincible. Otherwise, how could he intimidate thousands of demon kings? And the ghost king, Nongzhu, and patriarch Nanming swallowed with difficulty. How many people in the world could block Wen Lanfeng's thunderous strike, let alone Bai Changchun's freakish move? He actually used his fingers to clamp it. It was indescribable. It was a blatant act of contempt. With extreme disdain, he stretched out two fingers. The expression on Wen Lanfeng's face could only be described as infinite grief and indignation. He had gathered all his cultivation into the sword, but it was stopped by the opponent's two fingers. The previous fight was like a cat toying with a mouse. This was 100 times worse than the humiliation he had suffered 100 years ago. He had come confidently as soon as he came out of seclusion. It turned out that it was just a self-made joke, the biggest joke in the world. Do you still think you're qualified for me to use my sword now? Bai Changchun asked indifferently with the sword in one hand. I've lost. When Lanfeng spat out those 3 words with difficulty. Didn't you want to test the bottom line of my cultivation? Why did you admit defeat so quickly? Bai Changchun continued to ask mercilessly, do you remember what I said? What? When Lanfeng asked blankly. Cultivators above the soul formation stage who trespasses into the demon region must die. Bai Changchun reminded in a cold tone. When Lanfeng's pupils shrank. Nongzhu was shocked and said, Old Bai, don't be impulsive. Let's talk. However, how could the current Bai Changchun listen to advice? Umph. Another cold snort that sounded like Vajra subduing demons rang out. Without the slightest hesitation, the hand holding the sword pushed forward at lightning speed. When Lanfeng felt a majestic and unparalleled momentum coming from the sword, he could no longer hold the sword with both hands. Bang! The sword hilt hit his abdomen, and the fierce chi went straight to his limbs and bones. Puff! He could not hold back a mouthful of blood. Old Bai, stop! Nongzhu shouted wildly. The others were shocked speechless. The world's #1 expert was going to kill someone? Bai Changchun twisted the 2 fingers that held the sword. The giant silver sword that had escaped from Wen Lanfeng's hand returned to its original shape. It flipped in the air and bounced in the direction of Shantian Island. Whoosh! Bai Changchun was still in his original position in the air, but another Bai Changchun suddenly appeared in front of Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng was shocked. Teleportation was useless when he was locked on by such an expert's chi. He quickly covered his body with protective vigor energy. Bai Changchun pointed out 2 more times. The 2 small fingers contained a tremendous force. With a bang, Wen Lanfeng's protective astral energy was shattered. He was sent flying, and with a piu sound he spat out another mouthful of blood. Wen Lanfeng had just flown back a dozen meters when Bai Changchun, who had been chasing him all the way, arrived in front of him again. There was already a third Bai Changchun in the air. Wen Lanfeng struggled on his deathbed. He concentrated all his cultivation into a palm strike. At this time, Wen Lanfeng was already seriously injured and no longer had the ability to control the residual power of his battle. With this palm strike, the wild momentum rushed out like a stormy sea. Oh no! Ancestor Nanming exclaimed. A golden light flashed out of the storage bag and quickly spread into the sky. The entire obedient island was enshrouded in a golden net. The surging shock wave was blocked by this fine golden net. Shantian Island was safe and sound. However, the waves on this side of the 1,000-mile lake rose and fell. How could Bai Changchun care about Wen Lanfeng's palm strike? He clenched his fingers into a fist and brazenly punched Wen Lanfeng's palm. Wen Lanfeng spat out another mouthful of blood. His face was pale and he was sent flying again. The 4th Bai Changchun appeared like the god of death. The 3 phantoms behind him had not dissipated. One could imagine how fast he was. Then he clenched his fist into a palm and slapped Wen Lanfeng's chest. Wen Lanfeng smiled bitterly. After suffering 3 consecutive lightning strikes from the sword hilt, a finger, and a fist, his body was extremely weak. Especially the last punch, which had scattered the vital essence in his body. He had no ability to resist and could only wait for death. In fact, in this world, how many people could withstand Bai Changchun's 3 lightning strikes? Only Wen Lanfeng, with his profound cultivation, could withstand it. If it were anyone else, they would have been dead. Wen Lanfeng's bitter smile hid a trace of relief. It was not an injustice to die in the hands of the world's #1 expert. When he saw Bai Changchun's cold and handsome face approaching, he recalled the woman with unparalleled beauty in Spirit Fang Valley. Will you occasionally think of me after I die? Farewell, my most beloved woman. What I regret the most in my life is that I couldn't see you again before coming here. 2 drops of crystal-clear liquid gushed out of the corners of Wen Lanfeng's eyes. He actually thought of Lu Yanqing before he died. Nanming, Aleph *CK your ancestors. Nongzhu climbed the golden net and howled at the sky. His hands that were holding the net were already bloody. He had already prepared to teleport in front of Wen Lanfeng at the critical moment. He believed that Bai Changchun would not kill him. As long as he had a chance, he was not afraid of not being able to save Wen Lanfeng. He remembered that he had saved Wen Lanfeng in the past. Who would have thought that no matter how much he calculated, he would actually miss the golden net that Nanming ancestor had set up to block the impact wave. Just as Bai Changchun punched, he teleported over, but unexpectedly he was blocked by this treasure. This treasure was an upper-grade defensive spiritual treasure refined by ancestor Nanming for his own use. Even a spiritual treasure of the same level would not be able to break it. Nongzhu wanted to tear it apart with his bare hands. With his cultivation it was simply a dream. "Master!" Zi exclaimed. She had never seen her master so sad before. Farong and Lady Mu were even more confused. Ancestor Nanming was completely dumbfounded. He naturally knew what Nongzhu wanted to do, but he had ruined it. A series of events happened in an instant. Everything was unpredictable. "Ah!" Nongzhu helplessly howled while climbing the golden net. Now no one could stop Bai Changchun. No one could stop him. No, there was one more person, maybe he could. In a flash, the three words Yu Qianshou suddenly appeared in his mind. Bai Changchun's precious disciple. This was his last hope. No matter what, he had to try. Nongzhu impatiently shouted, "Yu Qianshou, stop. For Yu Qianshou, old Bai, for Yu Qianshou, you can't kill him. Stop, stop." It had to be said that this sentence really stopped Bai Changchun from slapping down. At the last critical moment, the three words Yu Qianshou made Bai Changchun's hand pause, and the following words made him completely stop. Although it was said to be slow, it actually happened very quickly. Everything happened almost in an instant. The three shadows behind Bai Changchun gradually disappeared. He stopped his hand and stood quietly in the air, letting Wenlanfeng fall into the 1,000-mile lake. Bai Changchun coldly glanced at Nongzhu, who was crawling on the golden net like a crab, as if asking what he meant. Before Wenlanfeng fell into the lake, he opened his eyes, which were full of disbelief. He also heard Nongzhu's words. He didn't expect that the name Yu Qianshou could save him from death. The cold lake water drowned him, and he had no strength to control himself. Bai Changchun's three strikes were too powerful. Not only did they scatter the real vitality in his body, but his bones and meridians were also injured. If that palm hit him again, he wouldn't have the slightest ability to resist, and his body would have been torn into pieces. The greenish-blue lake water was stained with blood from his floating body, and it spread out in strands. Nongzhu's eyes were wide open. With a cheer, he jumped down from the golden net, seemingly crazy and lively. "Ach! Oh my God!" Ancestor Nanming sighed helplessly, and finally felt relieved. Who knew that this sound would attract trouble? "Bastard!" Nongzhu roared angrily. She jumped over and grabbed his collar, punching and kicking him hard. Ancestor Nanming cried out in pain, but he didn't dare to fight back. After all, he was the one in the wrong. "Son of AB*, have you had enough?" Ancestor Nanming roared and pushed him away. "Damn it! Aren't you going to retract your stupid net? Do you want Wenlanfeng to drown instead of being beaten to death?" Nongzhu roared. Ancestor Nanming's anger was instantly extinguished. "Why are you still in a daze? I'll beat you to death, you bastard." Nongzhu rushed over and beat him up again. The girls were all dumbfounded. They didn't expect that a soul formation expert was also human. No, he had such a human side. I was wrong. Stop hitting me, let me retract the net." Ancestor Nanming crawled out from under Nongzhu's punches and kicks, his face covered with bloody fingerprints from when Nongzhu pulled the golden net. Ancestor Nanming cast a spell, and the golden net returned to the sky above Obedient Island with a whoosh. It shrunk into a ball, turned into a golden light, and shot into his storage bag. Nongzhu didn't have time to argue with him. In an instant she appeared below Bai Changchun, looked up and smiled foolishly at him. Then he leaped to the lake surface and grabbed Wenlanfeng, who was smiling foolishly at him. Seeing this, he raised his hand and gave Wenlanfeng 2 big slaps. Then he picked him up and quickly flew to Obedient Island. As soon as he put him down, the others also came over. "It's good that you're not dead, or I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life," Ancestor Nanming said with relief. He pressed his palm gently on Wenlanfeng's chest to check his injuries. After a moment of silence, he exhaled and said, "Your true vitality has dissipated, and your meridians and bones are all injured. Fortunately, you have a good foundation. If it were someone else, I'm afraid they wouldn't have been able to withstand it. Think of a way to recover." Wenlanfeng was secretly glad to be able to survive the disaster. Looking at the bloody fingerprints on Ancestor Nanming's face, he smiled knowingly. As a result, Nongzhu grabbed him again and gave him 2 more big slaps, scolding, "Smiling foolishly? What are you smiling for? You're happy that I didn't beat you to death, aren't you? You're not King dead, but I have to clean up your mess. Damn it. If I knew this earlier, I would have let you die freely." Chapter 510. These two slaps gave the group of people a fright. Ziyi opened her mouth. It was the first time she saw how brave her master was. This was Wen Lanfeng, the second expert in the world. Yet her master dared to slap him. How many people in the world would dare to do this? Ancestor Nanming touched his face subconsciously. This guy was crazy. He even dared to slap Wen Lanfeng. It seemed that he was not wronged. Although Wen Lanfeng did not have the strength to move, he was still sober. It was okay to slap him twice before, but why did he slap him twice now? Did he really think that his face could be slapped so casually? Wen Lanfeng immediately glared at him. What are you looking at? Are you not convinced? Stand up and slap back. Aren't you very powerful? What? Are you a bear now? Nongzhu sneered at him. Seeing that he was not convinced, she immediately raised her hand again and shouted, "Do you believe that I will give you 2 more slaps?" Alas, enough. Ancestor Nanming hurriedly hugged his arm. Wen Lanfeng was not a toy. How could he let him slap him casually? He had slapped him and scolded him. Nongzhu's anger had dissipated a lot. Regardless of whether Wen Lanfeng was willing or not, he lifted him up and helped him to sit cross-legged. He slapped his back and injected his vital energy into his body, helping him guide the dissipated vital energy back to his meridians. With Wen Lanfeng's cultivation, as long as he converged his vital energy, he should be able to recover quickly. The group of people stood on the side and looked at each other. They finally understood what it meant to slap and scold each other for love. Bai Changchun teleported back to the island. He glanced around coldly and pointed at Farong, saying, "Follow me." Then he slowly walked toward the big house in the center of the island. Hibiscus was immediately at a loss of what to do and didn't know what to do. Nongzhu, who was helping Wen Lanfeng guide his vital energy back, opened one eye and looked. Suddenly she stopped and stood up. She said to Ancestor Nanming, "Come, I will take this girl." Ancestor Nanming nodded and sat behind Wen Lanfeng. Nongzhu waved to Farong, and the two entered the big house one after another. After entering, Bai Changchun still had that cold look in his eyes. Farong stood there uneasily, not knowing what to do. Nongzhu pointed at Bai Changchun and said, "Hurry up and greet him. This is Yu Qianqiu's master, the person your man asked me to bring you here." Farong walked over while trembling with fear. She knelt down and kowtowed, "Junior Farong greets Senior." As soon as she knelt down, she didn't dare to get up. The scene of the battle had been carved into her heart. She hadn't expected Yu Qianqiu's master to be so powerful. Her heart was thumping non-stop and she was extremely nervous. Even Bai Changchun and Nongzhu could hear her heartbeat. Only when Bai Changchun asked her to get up did she stand up timidly. Seeing her lower her head as if she had done something wrong, Bai Changchun said indifferently, "Raise your head and look at me." Farong didn't dare to be disobedient. She hurriedly raised her head, but her eyes were a bit disobedient. She didn't dare to look straight at him, and she frantically avoided Bai Changchun's gaze. Bai Changchun stared at her eyes. Although she was flustered, her eyes were clear and pure. She wasn't a woman with messy thoughts. This was especially obvious on Farong. Looking at her eyebrows, it was obvious that she had lost her virginity. "You're Yu Qianqiu's woman?" Bai Changchun's expression and tone had eased a lot. "Yes." Farong didn't allow others to question her. "When did you and Yu Qianqiu meet? Where did you meet? Why are you together?" Bai Changchun kept asking questions. Nongzhu looked at him in a daze as if she didn't know him. Then she stood aside and pinched her chin, smiling inwardly. This scene was a bit like an ugly daughter-in-law meeting her parents-in-law in the secular world. Hibiscus naturally didn't dare to conceal anything. Apart from some of the things that Yu Qianqiu had told her, everything else was poured out like beans from a bamboo tube. She spilled everything. After that, Bai Changchun let her go out. He coldly looked at Nongzhu and snorted, "Tell me, what does it have to do with Yu Qianqiu to kill Wen Lanfeng or not? If you can't give me a satisfactory reason, Wen Lanfeng is still a dead man. It's useless for you to stop me. You can't do it again and again." Nongzhu's expression twitched. It seemed that if she didn't make up a satisfactory reason, Wen Lanfeng couldn't escape today. She smiled bitterly and said, "Old Bai, why do you do this? The cultivation world is full of deceit. It's not easy to find a few true friends. Although Wen Lanfeng is a little too infatuated, he's still a good friend. Why do you want to kill him?" "This is not the reason I want to hear," Bai Changchun said indifferently. "What a heartless guy." Nongzhu muttered and then said seriously, "I don't want you to kill him. Of course I'm selfish as a friend, but at the same time, it's also for the good of Yu Qianqiu. Think about it. Yu Qianshou is in danger when he travels among countries. If Wen Lanfeng helps him when he needs it, he'll be much safer, won't he? Bai Changchun glanced at her coldly and snorted, "You mean without Wen Lanfeng's protection Yu Qianshou won't be safe? Yes, you're powerful. As long as you show up, no one in the world will dare to touch your disciple." Nongzhu touched her forehead and said helplessly, "What will happen after you go to the Holy East Land? Do you think those old guys will be content with their place? Do you think Yu Qianshou can control the demon region with his current cultivation? Even if I do my best to help, Yu Qianshou and I can't stop those people's ambitions. But with Wen Lanfeng it's different. You've seen his current strength. Except for you, no one in the world is his opponent. If Yu Qianshou is in trouble, I don't dare to say for others, but I'm confident I can get Wen Lanfeng's help. You know, he's not a bad person." Bai Changchun was silent for a long time. His eyes were flickering. Later he slowly closed his eyes and said no more. Nongzhu was secretly relieved. She finally convinced this old guy. At the same time, she admired herself for coming up with such a good reason. It seemed that she had been with Yu Qianshou for too long and learned bad things. In the palace of Dayang Kingdom, the winner of the lively martial arts competition was finally decided. As expected, Zhang Peng relied on his powerful skills to defeat all his opponents. No one was a match for him. Because of his extraordinary skills, people suspected that he was a cultivator. However, after the secret appraisal of several consecrators in the palace, he was indeed an ordinary person, not a cultivator. In the end, Zhang Ping did not know whether to laugh or cry as he accepted the crown of first place. Wen Yuyuan and Wen Bai of Baiwan Kingdom also did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Qianshou had casually thrown out his follower and unexpectedly won the first place. Wen Bai also could not see that Zhang Peng was a cultivator. What made the two depressed was that Zhang Peng was a citizen of Baiwan. If he really became the son-in-law of Dayang Kingdom, the fabricated background that he had previously registered would be exposed. They had to find a way to cover up his lie when they returned. On the same day, the emperor of Dayang Kingdom, Zhao Heng, decided to host a banquet to entertain the diligent talents of various countries. At night, the palace of Dayang Kingdom was brightly lit. People sang and danced, immersed in a festive atmosphere. The top 20 winners of the competition received the honor of sitting in front of the emperor. Zhang Peng was naturally among them. He could be said to be the most lively one. People constantly came over to toast and congratulate this prospective son-in-law. Zhang Peng's face was constantly twitching. In the eyes of others, they thought that he was overjoyed. The lights were waning and people were singing and dancing. It was a scene of wealth and honor. Zhang Ping did not know how much wine he had drunk to drown his sorrows. He felt like he wanted to make himself drunk. At this moment, a palace maid suddenly came behind him and whispered in his ear, "The princess has ordered this servant to take young master to the West Palace for a while. Young master, please follow me." Zhang Peng was stunned when he heard this. He looked at the palace maid and thought to himself, "Could it be that I haven't officially married into the family, and that slut can't help but want to secretly have a rendezvous with me? I want to see what that slut wants to do." He was not afraid. He immediately got up and quietly left the banquet with the palace maid. The emperor Zhao Heng glanced at them and immediately recognized that the palace maid was his daughter's maid. He looked at the chief eunuch beside him and helplessly shook his head with a wry smile. The palace was deep and there were guards everywhere. The palace maid held a golden token and led Zhang Peng without any obstruction. Zhang Peng was also worried that there was something fishy going on, so he memorized the surrounding terrain along the way. After entering a large courtyard, there was a faint fragrance. Obviously, they had arrived at the residence of a woman. The palace maid led him to a brightly lit room. Before entering the room, Zhang Peng looked up at the plaque above the door. The words Liu Xiangjai were written in gold. As soon as he entered the room, he smelled the lingering fragrance of incense. In front of him were three women dressed in dignified white palace gowns. They were either standing or sitting and their eyes were all fixed on him. The palace maid stepped forward and handed the golden token to the youngest of the three. Zhang Peng understood that this woman was most likely the princess. Zhao Qinxiang took the golden token and waved her hand to dismiss the maid. "Send word that no matter what they hear, no one is allowed to come in without my permission." "Yes." The palace maid received the order and retreated. With a schwa sound, the door was tightly shut. Zhang Peng suddenly turned his head to look, and his heart secretly became vigilant. The other two women unscrupulously surrounded Zhang Peng and circled around him, sizing him up. The three people in the room were the three daughters of the Dayang Kingdom's emperor, Zhao Heng. After the eldest Zhao Rongxiang saw him, she covered her mouth and smiled at the second Zhao Hanxiang. He is a strong and burly man. Zhao Hanxiang nodded and smiled. Third sister, you got lucky. The third Zhao Qinxiang's face was as cold as ice, and there was not a trace of a smile. She suddenly shouted, Zhang Peng, why don't you kneel and greet this princess? The eldest and second Zhao Qinxiang smacked their lips. Third sister was establishing her might. They could not laugh anymore and quickly retreated. Zhang Peng coldly snorted and said without moving, I am not a subject of the Dayang Kingdom. Why should I kneel to you? You have become my Dayang Kingdom's consort. Naturally you are a subject of the Dayang Kingdom. Zhao Qinxiang sternly said. I haven't done it yet, right? Zhang Peng sneered. It is not too late to talk about it after I have done it. How dare you? Zhao Qinxiang shouted. Her figure shot up with a whoosh, rushing towards Zhang Peng. Under her dazzling white palace dress she kicked out a pair of legs. With a series of kicks she sent a strong gust of wind straight towards Zhang Peng's head. The skinny woman knew kung fu. Zhang Peng was slightly startled. His figure swayed left and right and he quickly dodged. Zhao Qinxiang's consecutive kicks missed. When she leaped over his head, she swung her leg backwards and swept across the back of his head. Every move was ruthless and aimed at his vital parts. Zhang Peng was slightly annoyed. In this palace, it was not good to fight back against a princess, but this woman was going too far. Immediately he blocked it with his palm and chopped down on her ankle, blocking that leg. Although he did not use much strength, when Zhao Qinxiang landed on the ground, a trace of pain flashed across her face. However, she clenched her teeth and resisted. Then she bent down and swept her leg. Zhang Peng could not help but laugh. Even if he was not a cultivator with his martial arts, how could she sweep him down? Thus, he pressed down on his lower body and simply stood there, letting her sweep him. Pa! When the two legs collided, Zhao Qinxiang could not help but let out a weak groan of pain. Zhang Peng originally thought that she would understand how powerful he was by now. Who would have thought that she would pull back her leg, press down and spring at him again? Her 10 fingers formed into sharp claws, and without the slightest bit of politeness, she clawed wildly as if she wanted to ruin Zhang Peng's face. Although she was not afraid of being injured, she was wearing a mask. Once she clawed at him, she would definitely be exposed. Zhang Peng coldly snorted. This time he did not hold back. His figure flashed, and with a swing of his palm, he slapped her lower abdomen and directly threw her back onto the soft couch. The speed of the flash was extremely fast, and in the eyes of the two women, it was just a flash of a shadow. The two of them revealed expressions of surprise. This Zhang Peng was very powerful. No wonder he could win first place in the martial arts competition. Zhang Peng, how dare you attack the princess? The eldest sister, Zhao Rongxiang, shouted. Zhang Peng ignored her and stared at Zhao Qinxiang asking, Princess, I don't know how I have offended you, but you want to kill me? Zhao Qinxiang covered her lower abdomen with her hand, gritted her teeth and said, I'll let you know what it means to be obedient. I'll let you know the consequences of not listening to this princess. After saying that, she rolled over and opened a long wooden box on the couch. 3 long swords with silver scabbards were grabbed and thrown out. Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang caught the swords and looked at each other. Zhao Qinxiang jumped off the couch with a sword in her hand and shouted, Eldest sister, second sister, set up a sword formation and teach him a lesson about the rules. Clang clang clang. The 3 swords were unsheathed. The 3 women flew like butterflies, and their swords intertwined with each other. Zhang Peng was speechless. How could all the daughters of the imperial family know martial arts? How did the emperor teach his daughters? As he dodged, he discovered that the youngest and unruly princess was the most vicious. The tip of her sword was actually aimed at his genitals several times. This thoroughly infuriated Zhang Peng. With a speed that was inconceivably fast for the 3 women, he flicked his fingers and easily seized the swords in the 3 women's hands. The 3 women stared at their empty hands in shock. Before they could react, they saw a figure flash by. They felt their bodies go numb and they couldn't move. Zhang Peng took the opportunity to seal the acupuncture points of the 3 women, and with a swing of his sword, the swords were nailed to the wooden beam. Don't think that just because you are a princess, I don't care about a trifling Dayan kingdom. Zhang Peng arrogantly threw down these words. He wanted to turn around and leave, but he immediately thought of the many guards in the palace. In addition, there were experts from the cultivation world overseeing this place. He really couldn't just barge in. His gaze fell on the gold medal on the small table beside the couch. He spat out the alcohol in his stomach and went over to pick up the gold medal. When he turned around and brushed past the princess, he caught a glimpse of the unruly princess's eyes filled with endless resentment. He was slightly startled and stopped to size up Zhao Qinxiang. He discovered that she was a delicate beauty with a slender waist and an alluring chest. His mind slightly heated up. He didn't know if it was because of the alcohol, but he now remembered his master's words to get the princess to bed as soon as possible. Since master has already said so, how can I not follow? Zhang Ping silently thought. As someone who grew up in a war, he paid particular attention to neatness. He turned around and moved Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang to face the wall. He then picked up Zhao Qinxiang and threw her on the soft couch. Zhao Qinxiang couldn't speak or move. She stared at Zhang Ping in fear, not knowing what he wanted to do. Hiss. Zhang Ping raised his hand and directly tore off her clothes. It seemed that he didn't know what gentleness was, and in a few moments, a white and tender body was revealed. Zhao Rongxiang and Zhao Hanxiang's eyes widened. Zhang Ping didn't notice that opposite them was a bronze mirror used for dressing up. The movement on the couch could be seen in the mirror. The two girls saw the man in the bronze mirror take off his clothes and press down heavily. If the two girls hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have never believed that someone dared to humiliate the princess in the palace. Zhao Qinxiang's eyes widened and tears silently flowed. She endured the pain of a broken melon. She never thought that there would be such a daring person, and in the end she fainted from anger. After Zhang Peng was done, he was also slightly shocked. He realized that he was a little too impulsive. He was secretly a little worried. Would something happen? After putting on his clothes, he pulled a brocade quilt to cover the beauty he had defiled. He took the gold medal and left without saying anything else. He really had the demeanor of a general. Just now he was a little flustered, but once he opened the door, he regained his composure. He closed the door and showed the gold medal to the palace maids who came over. He said in a deep voice, "The three princesses have something to discuss. Without a summon, no one is allowed to enter." The palace maids acknowledged and retreated. He swaggered out with the gold medal and went back the way he came. By the time he returned to the banquet, it was already coming to an end. Just in time for the banquet to end, he quietly followed the crowd and left. Emperor Zhaoheng saw that Zhang Ping came back alone. He didn't even have a guide. How could the palace allow an outsider to trespass? With a suspicious look in his eyes, he signaled the chief eunuch beside him with his eyes. As soon as he left the palace, Zhang Ping quickly found Pingxin Wang Wenyu to say goodbye, saying that he had something to do and would leave first. He also knew that the matter had gotten out of hand. Paper could not contain fire. He found an empty alley and quickly flew into the sky, returning to the small courtyard of the embassy. In the courtyard, Yu Qianqiu and Xn Laosan were drinking under the moonlight and chatting about the cultivation world. Zhang Peng's sudden intrusion almost startled Xn Laosan into making a move. During this time, there were too many people who were eyeing Yu Qianqiu covetously. When he realized that it was Zhang Peng, Xn Laosan was even more shocked. He didn't expect that this guy was actually a cultivator. Zhang Peng, what's wrong? Yu Qianqiu also noticed that there was something wrong with Zhang Peng's expression. Zhang Peng looked at Xn Laosan and stammered, "Sir, can I have a word with you?" Chapter 511. Third Lord Xn was unhappy to hear this. It was obvious that Third Lord Xn was trying to avoid him. Yu Qianqiu was startled. This was the first time he saw Zhang Peng like this. He thought that it must be something important. He waved his hand and entered the house with Zhang Peng. As for whether Third Lord Xn was happy or not, it was not his concern. It was not the time to care about Third Lord Xn's mood. Zhang Peng seemed to be afraid that someone would eavesdrop. With his early-stage tribulation passing cultivation, he barely set up a soundproof enchantment. Then he scratched his head, not knowing what to say. Yu Qianqiu looked him up and down and frowned. "What the hell are you doing? If you have something to say, spit it out. I have something important to do tonight. I don't have time to watch you pretend to be a woman." Zhang Peng gritted his teeth and finally told him everything that had happened. Yu Qianqiu's mouth opened wider and wider as he listened. After a long time he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He gave a thumbs up and said, "I thought I was a bastard enough. I didn't expect you to surpass your master. You actually dared to capture the princess in the palace. You are really not afraid of death. Don't you know that there are 3 old men in the last stage of tribulation passing in the palace? If they find out, they will kill you on the spot. No one will be able to refute it." Zhang Peng lowered his head in shame and muttered, "Master, you were the one who told me to get the princess into bed as soon as possible? F***ck your sister. When did I say such a shameful thing?" Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes. But he couldn't finish his sentence. He remembered that he had indeed said such a thing. "Master, do you remember now?" Zhang Peng asked weakly. "You were the one who did not control your lower body. Now you are blaming Master. How dare you say that? Why did I accept a beast like you as my disciple? Fortunately, I had the foresight to not let you call me Master in front of others. Otherwise I would have lost all my face. Sigh. I am ashamed." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. "Master, I know I was wrong." Zhang Peng scratched his head awkwardly. "This can't be hidden for long. They will find out sooner or later. Master, why don't we escape first?" "Come on, I've always been an upright person. When have I ever escaped?" Yu Qianqiu poked his chest and said, "You have to bear the consequences of your own actions. Didn't you get first place in the martial arts competition? Anyway, the princess will be yours sooner or later. It doesn't matter if you try the horse first before fitting the saddle. You might as well stay in Deyang Kingdom and be the prince consort." Zhang Ping panicked. "Master, you can't go back on your word. You said that sleeping with the princess doesn't mean that I have to be the prince consort." "Shut up. I'm warning you, I've never said anything like that. You can't slander your master's character anywhere." Zhang Peng had just been scolded to the point of dejection. He rubbed his chin and muttered, "Damn it. Wasn't it just sleeping with a woman? What's the big deal? If you were a commoner's daughter and you dared to do this, I would cripple you immediately. As for the emperor's daughter, since the emperor has many wives, he must have many daughters as well." Zhang Peng suddenly raised his head and weakly asked, "Master, you mean? Don't give me that cowardly look. It's disgusting." Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and coldly said, "So what if she is the emperor's daughter? Do what you have to do. Master is here, what are you afraid of?" He then walked out. That's right. There's nothing in this world that Master can't handle." Zhang Peng suddenly became spirited. The iron tower-like man nodded and bowed. He was just short of massaging Zhang Peng's shoulders and back. He removed the soundproof enchantment and quickly followed. In the imperial study of the imperial palace, Zhao Heng was drinking a hangover soup from a eunuch. The head eunuch walked in with a taut face. He gave a look to the eunuch in the room and the eunuch quickly retreated. Zhao Heng looked at him and calmly asked, "What's wrong?" The head eunuch went over and whispered a few words. Zhao Heng could no longer sit still and stood up abruptly. Bah! The cup in his hand shattered on the ground. Preposterous! Zhao Heng roared madly. He kicked over the imperial table in front of him and strode out. After rushing to the imperial harem and informing the three Mi brothers of the news, they were immediately enraged. Someone actually dared to do that to the princess under their noses. If word got out, wouldn't they become a laughing stock? It was obvious that he didn't care about the three brothers at all. He clearly didn't care about Illumination Peak. "Esteemed elders, I know that the one clan of Aquamarine Nation has an extraordinary status in the cultivation world, but I really cannot swallow this grievance today. I implore the esteemed elders to uphold justice for me." Zhao Heng cupped his hands in front of his chest and said angrily. He had already made up his mind. If the three masters were not willing to come forward, he would mobilize the army to besiege the Baiwan Nation's embassy. Mi Russian said in a low voice, "We watched the third young lady grow up. We will naturally seek justice for her." He turned to the two sides and said, "You two stand guard. I will go to the Baiwan Nation's embassy to ask for her." Then he quickly flew away. The group of people from Baiwan Nation returned to the embassy in a drunken state and dispersed. When Yu Yuan and Wen Bai had just walked into the main hall when they saw Yu Qianqiu sitting leisurely in the main hall. Zhang Peng stood silently at the side and Third XN was looking around. Wen Bai walked over and cupped his hands and said, "Mister, is there anything?" His tone was very respectful. Ever since he saw Yu Qianqiu's heroism in the battle that day, he could not help but admire him. "Ah, nothing much." Yu Qianqiu stood up and said with a smile, "We have disturbed you for many days. We are here to bid farewell to the two of you." When Yu Yuan and Wen Bai looked at each other worriedly, the latter frowned and said, "Is Zhang Peng also leaving with Mr.?" "Of course. We are also embarrassed to be living and eating for free," Yu Qianqiu said with a laugh. "Mister, do you know that Zhang Peng has already won the first place? There will be a ceremony in a few days and he will become the emperor's son-in-law of Deyang Nation. If he leaves, how will Baiwan nation answer to Daang nation? Wenbai said gloomily. Sigh. I'm afraid he won't be the emperor's son-in-law anymore. This guy has caused some trouble. Yu Qianqiu summarized Zhang Peng's scandal with great regret. Wenbai and Wen Yuyuan were instantly dumbfounded. Third brother Xen suddenly turned around and stared at Zhang Peng without blinking. He thought to himself, no wonder he came over in a hurry to whisper to me. So this is what happened. What's the difference between this and slapping Huo Zhongming's face? What guts? Originally, I didn't have the face to stay after causing trouble. But after thinking about it, I can't leave without knowing the reason and put the Wen family in a difficult position. So I waited for the two of you to come back and inform you so that you can prepare in advance, Yu Qianqiu said helplessly. Wen Yoyuan's face was already dark. He was the one who arranged for Zhang Peng's registration. If the two nations became enemies, how would he explain to the monarch when he returned? Wenbai's expression twitched. Prepare in advance? How can we prepare in advance? If Mr. takes Zhang Peng away, I'm afraid none of us will be able to leave Baiwan nation. TSK. As the younger generation of the world's second strongest expert, how can he be so afraid of trouble? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and then asked suspiciously, didn't Senior Wen Rui tell you the reason why he is in a hurry to leave? In fact, he also knew in his heart that Wen Rui had no reason to tell such a big thing like Wen Lanfeng coming out of seclusion. No. Wenbai shook his head. He wanted to ask but dared not. He was not qualified to inquire about matters of the upper echelons, but he showed an inquiring look. No wonder. Yu Qianqiu said solemnly, you don't need to be afraid of Dayan nation looking for trouble because your old ancestor, Wen Lanfeng, has come out of seclusion. Wenbai and Wen Yuyuan were shocked. The pillar of Baiwan nation who had been in seclusion for 100 years had come out. This was such a big thing. No wonder the old high priest was in a hurry to return. That's all I have to say. If they come looking for trouble, you can bring up your old ancestor. They won't dare to not give face to your old ancestor. We'll take our leave first. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and called out to Zhang Peng before leaving. He really wanted to leave, but he thought that he should not be too shameless. If he caused trouble for others, he should at least greet them and point them in the right direction. However, he had done too many bad things. Occasionally, a kind thought would delay him. It seemed that it was a little too late for him to leave now. They all paused at the same time. They sensed a divine sense sweep over them. Mi Russian had quietly appeared in the lobby, staring at Zhang Peng like a hawk. Yu Qianqiu also looked at Zhang Peng with an inquiring look. Didn't you say that no one would find out what you did for a while? Someone is staring at you like this, obviously for you. Zhang Peng was speechless. No one could explain if something happened to this thing. Wenbai and Wen Yuyuan looked at each other. They did not expect the other party to come looking for them. Third brother Xen did not care about the matter and continued to stay silent. Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, High Priest Mi, what brings you here? Mi Russian ignored him and pointed at Zhang Peng. He said indifferently, come with me. Damn it. I like people who are unreasonable because I like to be reasonable. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He waved his hand at Zhang Peng and signaled him not to speak. He said in a deep voice, High Priest Mi, you sure are powerful. You want people to follow you but they have to listen to you? Yu Qianqiu, this matter is not up to you to interfere. You are too meddlesome. You should think about how to protect your own life. Daang City will not let you hide forever, Mi Russian said expressionlessly. My life is in my hands. I don't need others to worry about it. But you, if you want to take my people away, you have to ask for my permission, Yu Qianqiu said bluntly. The scene of Ang Kuangtsung Ching Fu coming to Fuxian Island to ask for Guan Weiwu suddenly appeared in his mind. Guan Weiwu's silence made him feel cold. If he could not protect his own disciple, he would not be able to show his face anymore. Since when did Baiwan country's people become your people? Mi Russian squinted his eyes. Yu Qianqiu smiled coldly and said, Since when do you not need to worry about my people? Could it be that I still need to report everything to you? I want to ask you, what right do you have to take him away? You are asking him what he did? Mi Russian said sternly. Yu Qianqiu turned around and said, Zhang Peng, what did you do? Zhang Peng shook his head and said, I did not do anything. Chapter 5:12. Wenbai and the other two were speechless. These two were acting shamelessly. Mi Russian stared at Zhang Peng with a livid expression and said in a deep voice, You dare to quibble in front of me, I think you are tired of living. I official me you are wrong. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. It is understandable that he did something bad and did not admit it, but I really do not believe that he did something good and did not admit it. Birds of a feather flock together. You two shameless people, you have no choice but to leave today. Mi Russian narrowed his eyes and stopped arguing with them. He suddenly disappeared in front of everyone. Teleportation. The others were shocked. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed with fierceness. He quickly turned around and locked onto Zhang Peng's surroundings. Zhang Peng also knew the situation was bad. His shoulders shook and his protective energy surged out. As expected, Mi Russian appeared in front of him in an instant and slapped with his palm, trying to forcefully shatter the other's protective energy. How dare you! Yu Qianqiu attacked with his palm almost at the same time and shouted, absorbing Star's great skill. Zhang Peng's cultivation was much lower than Mi Russian's. He tried to dodge but failed. Bang! His protective aura was instantly shattered. His whole body was sent flying to the corner of the wall, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Although when Yu Yuan was a prince, he was only a mortal. Seeing this, he felt his heart palpitate. These cultivators were actually attacking right before his eyes. When Mi Russian attacked Zhang Peng, he had already turned around to look at Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that the latter wanted to fight him in cultivation, he sneered. After knocking down one of them with a single palm strike, Yi Shiwen quickly countered with a palm strike towards Yu Qianqiu. However, the moment he attacked again, Mi Russian suddenly shuddered. He felt like something was rapidly flowing out of his body and his body was rapidly stiffening. Especially when the meridians in his body were rapidly contracting. His vital energy could not flow smoothly. Dense white smoke gushed out from Mi Russian's body. Yu Qianqiu's palm was like a tube that attracted the wind. He followed Yu Qianqiu's advice and sucked the dense white smoke into his palm. Mi Russian's entire body shrunk rapidly, revealing an outline that was even drier than a mummy. His appearance was extremely horrifying. Third brother Xin, Wen Bai and Wen Yuan were all dumbfounded. Crack. Mi Russian's palm was still moving, but the crowd saw a withered arm fly out from his sleeve. Yu Qianqiu tilted his body slightly and watched as the arm brushed past him and smashed into pieces outside the hall. He turned around to look at the skinny skeleton in front of him and sneered, "You're really willing to sacrifice yourself to throw your arm out to hit someone." This joke was really cold. Seeing Mi Russian like this, Third Xin and the others could not help but shiver. They felt like they were in a dream as they stood there, recalling everything that had just happened. Mi Russian was already unrecognizable. His dried skin shrunk and his bones tightened. His appearance was extremely horrifying, but he still stood firm. From the contours of his face, one could faintly sense the fear he had before his death. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Zhang Peng, who was slowly getting up from the corner of the wall while wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. A hint of fierceness flashed through his eyes. He walked to the mummy and said face to face, "High Priest Mi, you could have attacked anyone, but you had to attack my people. I will not give Hu Zongming any face. Please don't take offense and punish him lightly." He took out the storage pouch on the corpse's waist and with a wave of his hand, a burst of green flames incinerated the corpse into ashes. Mi Russian disappeared just like that? Xin Laosen and Wen Bai looked at each other in dismay. Now they finally understood how Chu Dingfang died that day. The 4 words, absorbing Star's great technique, were deeply imprinted in their minds. What a terrifying technique. Yu Qianqiu looked as if nothing had happened. But in fact, he was secretly happy that he had once again proven the power of the water art. But he also understood that Mi Russian died because he was caught off guard. Plus, he was standing close to Mi Russian, which allowed him to maximize the absorption power of the water art. Otherwise, it would not have been so easy to kill Mi Russian. Seeing that Zhang Peng was fine, Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands at the others and said, "Goodbye." "Yu Qianqiu, where are you going?" "I will go too." Third Xin flashed over. Yu Qianqiu pointed at Zhang Peng and said, "He is seriously injured. I need to take him for treatment. Don't come and join the fun." "Are you seriously injured?" Third Xin looked at Zhang Peng suspiciously. He did not seem to be injured. He then asked, "What about your promise to go to Lingfang Valley with me?" "Don't worry. I am a man of my word. I will definitely do what I promised." Yu Qianqiu confidently patted his chest. He thought to himself, "I have to go just to see what the most beautiful woman in the world looks like." He casually took out a jade archive and wrote something in it. He threw it to Third Xin. Third Xin looked at it and put it away. He nodded and said, "I understand." Yu Qianqiu was about to turn and leave when he saw Wen Bai and Wen Yuan looking at the pile of ashes on the ground with a worried expression. He knew what they were worried about. He smiled and said, I will bear the consequences of my own actions. Since I have already taken action, you can push all the blame on me. If they come to ask for Zhang Peng, tell them that I am the one who took Zhang Peng away and killed me Russian. Let them come to me. Goodbye. Then he left with Zhang Peng. The others looked at each other speechlessly. After a while, Third XN also took his leave. Wenbai hurriedly went to a remote wing of the embassy. Before when Rui arrived, he had spent a lot of effort and spirit stones to set up a communication formation in the wing to make it easier for him to contact his family. Wenbai could use this formation to inform his family of what had happened here. On the peak of a mountain in Utopia, Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared with Zhang Peng in tow. Zhang Peng looked around. He was puzzled. Why did Master bring him here instead of returning to the military camp or Misty Palace? Kneel. Yu Qianqiu suddenly shouted. Zhang Peng was shocked. He saw his master glaring at him under the moonlight. He hurriedly knelt down as instructed. Yu Qianqiu stared at him and said in a deep voice, Zhang Peng, I am warning you again. Today's incident happened in the imperial family. But I want you to remember one thing. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you're a cultivator. I, your master, dare to do anything except harm the common people. If I ever find out that the thing between your legs has harmed the common people, I have 1,000 ways to make you wish you were dead. Do you understand? Zhang Peng's heart skipped a beat. Your disciple understands. Chief Instructor Guan is currently studying and arranging a battle plan. If your injuries are not too serious, return to the team and prepare to be deployed, Yu Qianqiu said calmly. A simple warning was enough. Whether he listened or not was his business. If he listened, then so be it. If he didn't, then he wouldn't be lenient. Yes. Zhang Peng's eyes lit up. He liked this idea. He immediately flew towards the military camp. Under the moonlight, Yu Qianqiu took out a jade archive. He inserted his divine sense into it and carefully examined it again. It was a complete map of Dayang Kingdom. Within Huazongming's territory, there were a total of 17 spirit stone mines, all of which had high yields. According to the records in the jade archive, these spirit stone mines had to hand over their spirit stones at a fixed time every month. The scouting team that Yu Qianqiu had sent out did not disappoint him. Within the time that he had requested, they had successfully planted teleportation markers near the 17 spirit stone mines. If nothing changed, the day of handing over the spirit stones to Illumination Peak would be a few days later. If he were to rob them at this time, he would gain something. Actually, these spirit stone mines only produced a few 100,000 high-grade spirit stones per month. The 17 spirit stone mines only produced a few million spirit stones in total. This small amount of spirit stones was no longer enough for him to make a big fuss. If he really wanted to get his hands on spirit stones, it would be more worth it to just rob the spirit stones that they had accumulated for hundreds or even thousands of years. But this time he didn't just want to rob them. His main goal was to cause destruction. His goal was to take revenge on Huazongming. Because of this guy, the contents of the Jade Archive had been made public, messing up all his plans. Moreover, Huazongming had set himself against him. If he didn't take revenge, it would be difficult to quell the hatred in his heart. The reason why he hadn't left Dayang City for the past few days was to wait for news from the scouting team. Moreover, there was another benefit to doing this. Today's incident would definitely infuriate Huazongming. It would be good to do something else to distract him. Also, he wanted his team members to see more blood. After a while, Yu Qianqiu disappeared from Utopia and began to personally investigate every spirit stone mine. A thick fog suddenly appeared in the wilderness of a spirit stone mine. The mineshaft guards didn't care, as natural phenomena were not something that they could interfere with. After Yu Qianqiu had a clear understanding of the people's arrangements, he quietly retracted the thick fog and sent a message back to Guan Yu, who was arranging the battle plan. Then he appeared at the next spirit stone mine and continued the same process. Once the situation of the 17 mines was clear, the 17 teams in Utopia were ready to set off. After Yu Qianqiu returned, he brazenly gave the order to kill, rob, and destroy everything. Then he sent the 17 teams to the various mines. The 17 bloody massacres began. As expected, none of the team members were spared. They even flipped through every corner, killing and robbing everything. The cultivators in the mine had nowhere to run. They cried and screamed and blood flowed like a river. Before they retreated, these team members rushed into the mine with a large number of astral-breaching talismans. Starting from the innermost passageway, he blew them up one by one until all the passageways in the spirit stone mine collapsed. Every residential area in the mine was also blasted to the ground. After sending the last team back to Utopia, Yu Qianqiu stood on a hill under the light of dawn. He looked at the crippled spirit stone mine below and sneered to himself, "Hua Zhongming, don't you like to play? I'll play with you until I'm injured. These collapsed spirit stone mines can let you play to your heart's content. Let's see how many years it will take for you to gather thousands of cultivators to mine." After he left, a shrill wind howled in the mountains. It was as if the souls of the cultivators lying quietly in a pool of blood were lingering, wailing about something. In the mess, a black triangular flag fluttered in the wind. The word hero bloomed in the blood. Chapter 513. In Utopia's military camp, Guan Yu looked solemnly at Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting across the table with his legs crossed. He had personally led a group of people to loot a spirit stone mine. When he saw the people he had personally trained massacring, he could not describe what he was feeling. He thought about how the people in the 17 spirit stone mines had all been killed. That was a few thousand people. He was shocked. He could not understand what Yu Qianqiu was trying to do. Why did he have to kill so many people? Unable to bear it, he ordered the few leaders to let the miners with low cultivation levels live. However, to his surprise, the few leaders did not carry out his orders firmly for the first time. One of them asked, "Chief Instructor, the order we received from the leader was to kill, rob, and destroy all of them. Did the leader change his orders?" He paused for a moment before saying, "No. These miners with low cultivation levels won't pose any danger even if they stay. Why is there a need to kill them all?" The few leaders looked at each other and said in unison, "It's our duty to obey the leader's orders. Chief Instructor, please take back your orders and carry out the leader's orders." Guan Yu was speechless. He waved his hand and gestured for them to continue. Only now did he understand why Yu Qianqiu would place so much importance on the brainwashing education. He kept instilling in all his team members the necessity and benefits of being loyal to the leader, as well as painting a beautiful future for all his team members. After this test, he understood that although he had the right to train this army, the real commanding authority had always been in Yu Qianqiu's hands. This army would only listen to Yu Qianqiu's commands. Any orders that went against Yu Qianqiu's will could not be carried out in this army. "Why did you kill so many people?" Guan Yu asked. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and lay on the chair. He placed his feet on the table and swung them gently. As soon as he returned, he received a secret report from his subordinates, saying that Guan Yu had given an order that was contrary to his. He knew Guan Yu quite well. When he kidnapped this guy, he was only in the qi refining stage and had never experienced in the cultivation world. How could he know the dangers of the cultivation world? It was not surprising that he was soft-hearted. After a moment of silence, Yu Qianqiu did not reply to him. Instead, he opened his eyes and asked Zhang Peng, "Zhang Peng, when you were in a war, what was the highest number of people you saw die in a battle?" "This is the most I've ever seen. More than 100,000 people died on both sides. The battlefield was filled with dead bodies as far as the eye could see," Zhang Peng replied. He glanced at Guan Yu with a hint of dissatisfaction. Guan Yu actually dared to go against his own master. He was someone who had been tempered by blood and fire on the battlefield. Just now, he had killed to his heart's content, so he didn't have the heart to do so. A general's success is built on the bones of tens of thousands. Yu Qianqiu mumbled and put down his leg on the table. He stared at Guan Yu and shook his head. "Yunchang, I'm not a homicidal maniac. I definitely wouldn't kill so many people for no reason. I naturally have my reasons for doing so. You're a good person, but sometimes you're too soft-hearted. Looks like I need to arrange for you to go out with me. What do you think?" Guan Yu was silent for a moment, then he shook his head and said, "Forget it. I don't need to change myself. This is good enough. In the future, let other people do the fighting and killing. I'll stay here and continue to do my own things." As he said this, his mind was thinking about the woman in white and ethereal palace. He sighed in his heart. "Let me watch over her silently. I'm willing to watch over her silently for the rest of my life. I don't want to go anywhere. I just hope to see her once in a while and I'll be satisfied." Yu Qianqiu didn't understand what he was thinking, but he could sense that he was a little depressed. He muttered, "That's fine too. From now on you should focus on training. The fighting and killing in the outside world really doesn't suit you." After exiting Dayang City's west gate, there was a wide official road. Following this road, it led to many countries. Third brother Xan rode a horse and followed the instructions in the Jade Archive, following the official road. However, after walking for half a day, he didn't see Yu Qianqiu at all. He began to suspect that Yu Qianqiu was playing with him. As he passed by a col between two mountains, he suddenly heard the sound of rushing wind. Third brother Xang caught it with his hand, turned his head and shouted, "Who's there?" He saw Yu Qianqiu walking out of the forest on the hillside, holding a green apple in his hand and chewing on it with a grin. Third brother Xian's face lit up. He looked at the green apple in his hand and took a bite of it as well. However, he realized that it was so sour that his tongue was about to fall off. He quickly threw it away. Yu Qianqiu wasn't much better off. He was also vomiting non-stop. Third brother Xang cursed, "Yu Qianqiu, how could you let me eat something so disgusting? Damn it. There's a wild apple tree in this forest. I took a bite and realized that it was disgusting," Yu Qianqiu said as he stuck out his tongue. "Then why did you eat it so happily? You tricked me on purpose." Sigh. "Didn't you say that we'd share blessings and misfortunes together? Why are you here?" Third brother Xan looked around. Yu Qianqiu was still spitting out the acid in his mouth. He had paid a hefty price to trick him. As he vomited, he said, "I've been waiting for you here." In fact, the jade archive he gave third brother Xan contained a strand of his own consciousness. He could contact third brother Xan at any time. Third brother Xan had just arrived here, and he had just left Utopia. He guessed that the cultivators guarding outside Dayang City would have to wait in vain for a period of time. The two of them discussed where to go. Then they released their horses and flew away together. Light Illumination Peak, Great Hall of Light. Mi Ruhai wept bitterly as he told his master the news of his brother's death. Hua Zongming's face was dark. He crushed the golden cup in his hand into a golden pancake. He said sternly, "Yu Qianqiu, how dare you?" From this, it could be seen that Wenbai had indeed followed Yu Qianqiu's instructions and pushed all the blame onto him. "Return to the palace first and detain the people from Baiwan Nation. I'd like to see how the Wen family will explain this to me." Hua Zongming narrowed his eyes. "I won't forgive Yu Qianqiu. Master, there's one more thing." Mi Ruhai wiped his tears and said, "The Wen family said that their ancestor Wen Lanfeng has come out of closed-door cultivation." What? Hua Zongming was shocked. He asked again, "What did you say?" "The Wen family said that Wen Lanfeng has come out of closed-door cultivation," Mi Ruhai repeated. In fact, when he found out that his brother had been killed last night, he had wanted to kill a few people from the Wen family to vent his anger. Who knew that Wenbai would suddenly say that Wen Lanfeng had come out of closed-door cultivation, which shocked him. He naturally knew what kind of person Wen Lanfeng was. He was someone that even his master was wary of. Although he was angry, he did not dare to cause trouble for his master. He could only suppress his anger and return to Light Illumination Peak to report to his master. That love addict has come out of closed-door cultivation? Hua Zongming slowly sat down and thought for a while. He sighed and said, "Don't touch the people from the Wen family for now. I'm no match for that guy. Don't provoke them for now. Wait until I've gathered the information. You go back first." He had no choice but to obey his master's orders. Mi Ruhai choked and left. At this moment, a strong man directly flashed into the Great Light Hall. After bumping into Mi Ruhai, he frowned and said, "Ninth junior brother, what's wrong?" This person was Hua Zongming's eldest disciple, Lu Qingjian. He looked much younger than Mi Ruhai, but in fact he was older than him. Mi Ruhai choked and said, "Eldest senior brother, my eldest brother was killed by Yu Qianqiu." Eighth junior brother was killed? What happened? Lu Qingjian asked in shock. Mi Ruhai rambled again. The former was so angry that he laughed and said, "What a good Yu Qianqiu. He dared to provoke our Light Illumination Peak." "Qingjian, why did you come here in such a hurry?" Hua Zongming asked, feeling a headache coming on. "Master, misfortune never comes alone." Lu Qingjian took out the little black flag of the hero, and walked over. "Our 17 spirit stone mines were destroyed overnight." What? Hua Zongming stood up again and snatched the little black flag. After looking at it, he sneered, "Another hero. I thought he was only targeting Yin Baikong. So he specifically landed in our Dayang kingdom to cause trouble. I wanted to watch Yin Baikong get into trouble. What do you mean by the spirit stone mines were destroyed?" Lu Qingjian clenched his fists so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. 17 spirit stone mines were completely destroyed, and all the spirit stones that were delivered were looted. Several thousand disciples were slaughtered, and not a single one of them survived. It will be very difficult to recover. The Great Light Hall instantly quieted down. Mi Ruhai no longer cried and quietly retreated. To Light Illumination Peak, This matter was much more important than his eldest brother's death. The 17 spirit stone mines were the main source of Light Illumination Peak's spirit stones. If he continued to cry, he might be punished by his master. It was better to obediently return. This is not looting. Someone is taking revenge on me. Otherwise there is no need to be so ruthless. Hua Zongming's face was gloomy. He opened the flag in his hand and said with an unpredictable expression, "The master of this hero should have a grudge against me. He is someone I know." 17 spirit stone mines were attacked in one night. This was premeditated a long time ago. Master 8th Junior was killed on the same day as the attack on the spirit stone mines. Do you think this matter is related to Yu Qianqiu? Lu Qingjian asked suspiciously. It shouldn't be. Hua Zongming shook his head. This is not something that one person can do. It is impossible for us to not know that Yu Qianqiu brought so many people from Wuxia. With his cultivation, it is impossible for him to travel to so many places in one night. As he said this, his face suddenly turned sinister. Investigate. Use all the people that can be used. Don't worry about other things. Investigate this matter first. I want to see who is behind this. Lu Qingjian immediately went to make arrangements. Such a big matter naturally could not be hidden. In a few days the news spread throughout the cultivation world. The mysterious hero once again caused an uproar in various countries. Yin Baikong, who was on Cornucopia's God of Wealth peak, had been depressed by the previous incident. He had mobilized his subordinates to investigate everywhere but to no avail. When he heard this news he was stunned at first, but then he laughed out loud. At first he thought that the hero was specifically targeting him. He did not expect it to be even more ruthless this time. That bastard Hua Zongming must not be laughing anymore. Perhaps he was also implicated by that bastard last time. The hero must have been cutting grass to kill a rabbit, robbing him along the way. In fact, the main target was Hua Zongming. Otherwise there was no need to be so ruthless. After thinking it through, Yin Baikong felt much better. After being depressed for a long time, he finally decided to go down the mountain to see how business was going. Chapter 5:14. World Commerce. Speaking of world commerce, one had to mention its founder, Yin Baikong. Yin Baikong could be said to be an extraordinary person in the cultivation world. It wasn't because of his high cultivation but because he liked doing business. He was unique among the spirit-severing experts in the cultivation world. It was because of this that he founded World Commerce. The headquarters of World Commerce was in Cornucopia. The tallest mountain in Cornucopia was called God of Wealth Peak. This series of names were all given by Yin Baikong himself. From this, it could be seen that Yin Baikong really did have a hobby of doing business. Even now, when his cultivation had reached spirit-severing late stage, he would still personally pay attention to business matters. Cornucopia could be said to be the most prosperous place in the cultivation world. Of course, Yin Baikong wasn't the only shop here. Otherwise, his business wouldn't be so prosperous. Every country had their own shops here. The flourishing area around the foot of God of Wealth Peak was Cornucopia. Yin Baikong himself often stood on God of Wealth Peak and gazed down. Thinking back to the barren mountain valley that had become the flourishing area it was today, Yin Baikong was often very proud. Cornucopia Hall was where world commerce's money came and went. The spirit stones that flowed here every day, if converted to high-grade spirit stones, were at least 10 million. At this moment, in Cornucopia Hall, world commerce's disciples were counting the spirit stones that flowed in and out. Jing Yuankong was overseeing this place. Yin Baikong had his hands behind his back. Like an old merchant, he barged in and looked around. When World Commerce's disciples saw Yin Baikong, none of them actually said anything. They just glanced at him and then lowered their heads to do their own things. Jing Yuankong was slightly startled. Master had always been in a bad mood. Why did he come down today? It seemed like he was in a good mood today. Jing Yuankong hurriedly bowed and then led his master to the back hall. Because the front hall was a busy place, chatting was not allowed. This rule was set by Yin Baikong himself and he had always been the first to follow it. When they reached the back hall, Yin Baikong's first words were, "Has everything been normal?" "Everything is normal," Jing Yuankong replied. Yin Baikong nodded. "Cornucopia Hall is about to begin. How are the preparations?" "Everything is being prepared in an orderly manner. It won't affect the Cornucopia Hall," Jing Yuankong said seriously. Cornucopia Hall was the largest trading event in the cultivation world. It was held once every 10 years. At that time, there would be a large number of cultivators from various countries. It could be said to be exceptionally prosperous. It was also the time when the World Chamber of Commerce was rolling in money. The master and disciple talked about business for a long time. Finally, Yin Baikong asked, "How are the inner disciples doing?" "I'm not too sure about that," replied Jing Yuankong. Yin Baikong nodded slightly and did not blame him. Of the two disciples, Jing Yuankong was mainly in charge of business matters. The eldest disciple, Sikongju, was in charge of the affairs of the sect's disciples. Some of the more secretive matters had always been handled by the eldest disciple, Sikongju. Jing Yuankong didn't care about it, which made him feel more at ease. In fact, Jing Yuankong had also concealed one thing. He knew that Guanzhongkai had been forced to admit defeat by Yu Qianqiu, but he did not mention it. After all, he was the eldest senior brother's disciple. If he were to say it, he would be suspected of sowing discord. As for whether or not the paper could wrap up the fire, the responsibility would not fall on his head in the end. East Sea Everlasting Island. When the news of the 17 spirit stone mines in Huazhongming's territory being looted spread, cultivators from various countries were discussing it. It became the hottest topic on the island. In the deep mountains and valleys of Wuxia Island, there was a constant rumbling sound. A phantom was flashing everywhere in the forest of rocks. Wherever the phantom went, the huge rocks would crumble into pieces. Man Hu and his fellow disciples were watching from the side of the cliff with their arms crossed. After a while, the rumbling stopped and the phantom flashed up the cliff. A cloud of black mist gradually dissipated, revealing Yan Zhuixing's naked upper body. His muscles were incomparably sturdy. Compared to his previous skinny and weak self, he was like a completely different person. After receiving the clothes from Man Hu, Yan Zhuixing looked at the broken rocks in the valley and shook his head. "My demonic charm movement technique hasn't been able to make any progress. Looks like it won't work just by relying on external force. I need the help of the 7-star blood orchid." "State Preceptor, where can I find 7 stalks of 7-star blood orchid?" Man Hu muttered, "I can think of a way to get 1 or 2 stalks, but I'm afraid it will be difficult to get 7 at once." "Didn't you say that in the World Chamber of Commerce's upcoming cornucopia meeting, there is nothing you can't buy as long as you can afford it? I wonder if I can buy the 7-star blood orchid I need there?" Yan Zhuixing asked. "Don't worry, young palace master. I have already reported this matter to Master. Master will naturally pay attention to this matter. As long as the 7-star blood orchid appears, Master will definitely buy it at all costs." Man Hu said. Yan Zhuixing nodded, turned around and said with a smile, "I wonder if there is anything new in the various countries recently?" Man Hu and his fellow disciples looked at each other and found that this young palace master was becoming more and more concerned about the various countries. He would often ask questions. They didn't know what he was thinking, but he definitely wouldn't ask for no reason. They were afraid that there was an inside story that others didn't know. Something new happened yesterday. The 17 spirit stone mines in the Dayang Kingdom were looted overnight. After that, all the spirit stone mines were destroyed. Man Hu said with a smile. "Oh." Yan Zhuixing's eyes flickered for a while and said with a faint smile, "Could it be that Hero did it again?" Old Seven said strangely, "Young palace master, how do you know that it was done by Hero?" Seems like I guessed correctly." Yan Zhuixing looked back and thought that it wasn't the first time Yu Qianqiu did something like this. He had already done it when he was in China. This was completely Yu Qianqiu's style, stealing chickens and dogs and disturbing people's peace. Old Seven nodded repeatedly and said, "Young palace master guessed correctly. It was done by that Hero. Damn it. I don't know who actually has the ability to rob 17 spirit stone mines in one night. Even Huazhongming couldn't do anything to him. He's probably hopping mad right now." Man Hu waved his hand at Old Seven and turned around to ask, "Young palace master, do you want to continue cultivating demonic arts or go back to rest?" "State Preceptor, I want to walk around the various countries. What do you think?" Yan Zhuixing looked at the distant mountains and said slowly, "What?" The few of them said in surprise. They didn't know why he suddenly had such an idea. Yan Zhuixing turned around and said to the few of them with a faint smile, "I often hear cultivators from various countries talking about the excitement of the cornucopia gathering. I really want to go and see if I can find the 7-star blood orchid I need." The few of them looked at each other. Man Hu frowned and said, "The situation here is so tense. How can you leave, young palace master? The cornucopia gathering is held once every 10 years. Young palace master might as well go next time." "The situation is tense?" Yan Zhuixing glanced at the few of them and sneered, Is it really tense? Why can't I see it at all? Although there are constant small battles, the various countries seem to prefer to waste time here. No one is willing to carry out the final battle. It doesn't matter if I'm here or not. This man who smiled bitterly and said, "Young palace master, don't be anxious. There is a reason for this. Wait a year or two and the various countries will definitely rush to attack." Yu Qianqiu walked to the edge of the cliff and kicked a stone. He watched him go down and said, "What is the reason? Can State Preceptor tell me honestly?" Man who thought for a moment and walked to stand beside him and said, "This isn't a secret that can't be told. The various countries are all worried about the number one expert in the world." By Changchun? Yan Zhuixing retracted his gaze and stared at him and asked, "Didn't you say that he wouldn't interfere if the soul formation realm cultivators of the various countries didn't personally interfere with the affairs of the Wuxia cultivation world? Why do they have to worry about him? Although that's the case, everyone would rather wait another year or two. Why? It's good that everyone abides by the agreement, but if the various countries force the Wuxia cultivation world to a dead end, Bai Changchun can go to the various countries even if he doesn't have to come to Wuxia. This was something that no one thought of at first. Only later did someone raise this doubt. The various countries thought that it would be better to wait for Bai Changchun to go to the East Holy Land. At that time, the various countries would join hands and the Wuxia cultivation world wouldn't be able to resist. Man who explained. Yan Zhuixing sneered and didn't say anything. What did the various countries have to worry about? In the end, it was all because the soul formation realm cultivators were afraid that Bai Changchun would find trouble with them. Therefore they would rather hide like a tortoise. Thinking about it, it was funny. There were so many soul formation realm experts, but they were actually scared by one person. He really didn't know what to say. As for why the Wuxia cultivation world didn't gather all their forces to take the opportunity to eliminate the forces of Limitless Island, it was probably because of their old habits. Everyone was dragging each other's back. If you don't take out your capital, why should I take out my capital? Yan Zhuixing was born and raised here. He was very clear about the old habits of the Wuxia cultivation world. He didn't know what to say. Since I have to wait another year or two, I might as well go to the various countries. This matter is decided. Yan Zhuixing didn't know if he was saying this to them or to himself. Man who said helplessly, "Since young palace master has decided to go, I will go and arrange it." The news of Yu Qianqiu leaving Deyang City had been spread by some people. All the cultivators were looking for him everywhere. Before the cornucopia meeting, the biggest event in the cultivation world, killing Yu Qianqiu was the most important thing for the cultivators of various countries. The two treasured sabers on him were something everyone wanted. Whoever found Yu Qianqiu first would have the chance to get the two treasured sabers first. For a time, the search for Yu Qianqiu was carried out in the cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu naturally knew that his situation wasn't very good. He pulled third brother Xian along and tried to keep a low profile. Third brother Xian was willing to bear the burden and was not afraid of hard work. He took the initiative to bring Yu Qianqiu to hide here and there. He wanted to bring him safely to Lingfang Valley. Chapter 5:15. The two of them sneaked along the way, flying and hiding. From time to time, there were cultivators wandering around in the sky, and there were more and more signs. The two of them even found Foundation Establishment disciples searching in the sky on their flying swords. This kind of small cultivator couldn't stop the two of them, but it was clear that they only sent them as eyes and ears, and didn't intend to rely on them to kill Yu Qianqiu. But they couldn't touch them because if they killed one they would attract a whole bunch of others. There was no other way, they could only hide. This kind of searching method was very scary, and in the end the two of them were forced to fly close to the ground in the deep mountains. They didn't dare to walk on the main road and could only hide in the deep mountains. Occasionally they would startle a flock of birds, and the two of them would quickly run far away, then hold their breath and hide. Soon they could see more than 10 cultivators quickly flying over, searching everywhere in the dense forest. Third brother X, you go back to Spirit Fang Valley first, I have a way to escape. Yu Qianqiu didn't know how many times he said similar words. However, third brother Xn always had a solemn expression on his face as he firmly refused. No, you were originally hiding in Deyang City. If it wasn't because I insisted that you follow me to Lingfang Valley and exposed your whereabouts, you wouldn't have ended up in this state. He was talking about the day before when the situation wasn't so critical. Because he randomly shouted in the mountains, it attracted an early tribulation passing cultivator to search. Third brother Xian was worried that if this person escaped, he would attract a large number of people, so he killed him on the spot. Who knew that the person who was killed had a restriction on him? This restriction was similar to the one that Yu Qianqiu used when he first went to Demon Ghost Domain to train. The person who searched must have carried a divine sense compass, and knew everyone's whereabouts like the back of his hand. Once the person died, the other party immediately knew their whereabouts. This was good, it was like poking a hornet's nest. After startling a group of people, this group of people startled others, and cultivators from various countries heard the news and came. This was called a chase, so the two of them were forced to suffer. Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You can't be blamed for this. I can't hide in Deyang City forever. If I did, Hu Zongming wouldn't have let me go. At least you won't be in danger in Deyang City for the time being. Third brother Xian stubbornly said. He was certain that he had implicated Yu Qianqiu. Third brother Xian, Uncle Xian, I'm begging you, please leave first, I really have a way to get out of here. If you don't King leave, I'm going to be dragged to death by you. Yu Qianqiu was just short of kneeling down and begging him. It wasn't a good feeling to be chased all over the mountains. He really couldn't take it anymore. As long as third brother Xian left, he could immediately teleport back to Utopia. With the teleportation mark planted by the scouts, he could go anywhere with ease. Third brother Xian suddenly turned around and stared at him. His breathing became heavier and his eyes reddened. Yu Qianqiu was startled and asked suspiciously, "What do you want?" There aren't many people like you in the cultivation world. Third brother Xian shook his head and sighed. Yu Qianqiu was confused and asked blankly, "What do you mean? What's wrong with me?" You'd rather give up your own safety than drag others down. A friend in need is a friend indeed. Third brother Xian said emotionally. Yu Qianqiu bit a finger in his mouth. His expression was a little dazed. His thoughts had flown to the highest heavens. Damn it. You can buy people's hearts like this? Brother, although I'm older than you, please allow me to call you brother. Third brother Xian patted his chest and said, Today I, third brother Xian, will say this. As long as you can escape from this, if you encounter any trouble in the future, just mention the names of the 9 brothers of the Xian family. We're all brothers. As long as there's anything we can do, we'll go through fire and water for you. Really? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Your 9th brother is a soul-forming expert. He'll go through fire and water for me? Don't worry, we 9 brothers are of one mind. We admire people like you the most. Third brother Xian sighed again. There aren't many people like you in the cultivation world. The two of them were actually squatting on the branches of a big tree. Yu Qianqiu was like an ape, one hand holding onto the branch above his head. Sunlight shone through the gaps between the leaves on his face. He plucked a leaf and spat it out, then plucked another one and spat it out. He didn't know what to say. After a long silence, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. Sigh. Being unruly is just my appearance. I didn't expect you to see through my true nature today. I'm ashamed. Just then, a few whizzing sounds flew over their heads. The two of them immediately held their breath. From the sounds, they seemed to be at least in the middle stage of tribulation passing. Yu Qianqiu immediately turned hostile. He lowered his voice and shouted, Third brother Xian, get the hell out of here. We'll talk about your nonsense after we escape back to Lingfang Valley. Yu Qianqiu, scold me all you want. I understand your feelings. Third brother Xian looked at him affectionately and said, I'll be fine if I go out. But where can you go? You can't go anywhere. The entire cultivation world is looking for you. They're searching everywhere. At least if I'm here, I'll have a helper, right? Yu Qianqiu was startled. Third brother Xian's words reminded him of something. Even if he could teleport out, there were people searching everywhere. He was afraid that once he showed himself, he would be chased by a large group of people. It would be troublesome. We'll share blessings and misfortunes together. Third brother Xian pointed to the front and said with a determined look, Let's go out together. Yu Qianqiu looked in the direction he was pointing. He frowned and said, After 2 more mountains, we'll be in the Jinshan country, right? Yes. Pu Taidong's territory? Xian Laosan nodded with a thoughtful look on his face. The landscape of the Jinshan country gave them a headache just thinking about it. Third brother Xian had been here more than once. Naturally he knew about it. Yu Qianqiu had read about it from a jade archive. There were almost no forests in the entire Jinshan country. There were only deserts and exposed rocky areas everywhere. Although the entire country seemed a little desolate, the most distinctive feature was the abundance of various mineral resources. In Yu Qianqiu's understanding, it was rich in all kinds of metals. The people in the country made a living by mining. All kinds of rare metals were highly sought after by the cultivation world. This was also where Pu Taidong's biggest source of income came from. But because there were no forests to hide, the terrain was too exposed. As soon as the two left the Dayang country's territory, they would immediately be exposed to the eyes of the public. When that happened, it would be difficult to hide. This is troublesome. Third brother Xen frowned deeply. After we get out, run southwest. Yu Qianqiu said with a stern look on his face. Third brother Xen said in surprise, you mean to go to the misty forest? Yes. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, let's go to the misty forest. Third brother Xen waved his hand and said, no. You came from the cultivation world of China. You might not know how powerful the misty forest is. The Eastern Holy Land, the Demon Domain, and the misty forest are the three forbidden areas of the cultivation world. Ordinary people can't go there. The Eastern Holy Land is mysterious and unpredictable. There is no return. There are countless demon ghosts in the Demon Domain, and the world's #1 expert oversees it. The misty forest is shrouded in 7-colored poisonous fog all year round. No one knows how deep it is. Even demigod experts are afraid to enter. At most, they can only enter by relying on their powerful cultivation. Yu Qianqiu had seen what he said in the jade archive left behind by Lu Wanwan. On the topographic map of the Jinshan country, this place was marked with a blank space. It only stated, the misty forest, a forgotten corner. Shrouded in 7-colored poisonous fog all year round. Not worth paying attention to. Is there anything else besides the poisonous fog? Yu Qianqiu asked. I don't know. Third brother Xan recalled and said, my master did enter the misty forest, but he only went to the surrounding area to pick some poisonous plants to refine pills. However, my master said that he heard the roar of some wild beast, but he couldn't be sure. It might have been the wind. Because the 7-colored fog is too poisonous, it's hard to imagine what kind of venomous insect could survive in there. Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while. Since there was nothing else and he had taken the Rui pill, he shouldn't be afraid of the poison. Even if there was something strange, he could escape in time. A green flying sword flew out. Yu Qianqiu jumped down from the tree and landed on the flying sword. He said with a cold expression, Third brother Xen, it's time for us to part. Return to Lingfang Valley first. I'll find you when the time comes. No, we agreed to share fortune and misfortune together. How can I leave you alone? Third brother Xen waved his hand and pointed to the side. Worst comes to worst, we'll spend more time and take a detour. Once we reach Lingfang Valley with my master around, no one will dare to enter. Do you want me to hide in Lingfang Valley for the rest of my life? Yu Qianqiu sneered. If I really want to hide for the rest of my life, why would I hide in Lingfang Valley? Since everyone likes to play with me, I'll play with them. If I don't play until they stop, then my name isn't Yu Qianqiu. What do you want to do? Third brother Xan was stunned. Without saying anything, Yu Qianqiu rode his flying sword close to the ground and quickly flew through the forest. Third brother Xan paused for a while, then quickly chased after him. After hiding for a while, the two of them finally crossed 2 mountains. When they reached the dense forest at the foot of the mountain, they stopped. Looking from the forest, the lush green had gradually faded away. The gravel formed a desolate land in front of them. There were more than 10 people in the air watching the forest closely. Occasionally, there were people flying over them. What do you want to do? Third brother Xen whispered in his ear. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he pondered. He didn't answer him. According to the map, the dense fog forest was about 50 miles away from here if he went southwest. With his speed, he would definitely be stopped by an expert who was faster than him, and then he would attract a large group of people to attack him. It seemed like he could only let third brother Xan temporarily lure the enemy to buy some time for himself. Chapter 5:16. Third brother Xen, I need to discuss something with you. What is it? Third brother Xen looked around vigilantly and leaned his head closer. After you get out, run towards the northwest and help me distract them. Then I will secretly follow behind. Don't look at me like that. Don't worry, I won't go to the mist forest. You just need to distract them and I will be able to sneak out. Don't worry, didn't you see that they surrounded Dayang City like an iron bucket? I still managed to escape. Third brother Xine thought about it and agreed. He still couldn't figure out how Yu Qianqiu managed to escape from Dayang City. But he still asked worriedly, are you sure you can do it? Yes. Yu Qianqiu took out an ordinary black iron flying sword and handed it to him. Use this to escape later or else we will be exposed. And this, wrap it. He pulled out a large piece of black cloth and covered third brother Xian's head with it. Seeing how meticulous he was, third Xian started to believe that he really had a way to escape. He pulled the black cloth to cover his face and nodded to indicate that he was ready. Yu Qianqiu looked around and said without hesitation, "Go. Be careful." Third brother Xian stepped on his flying sword and flew out of the forest towards the northwest direction. Just as he got out, someone shouted, "Over there!" The dozens of people who stopped in the air quickly chased after him. "Oh whoa!" Someone let out a long howl and called for his fellow sect members. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Yu Qianqiu hid below and stared at the sky. In the blink of an eye, there were hundreds of people flying over his head. This was obviously only a small portion of the people who were chasing after him. He couldn't help but grit his teeth in anger. Using such a big scene, they were trying to put me to death. I like it so I won't feel guilty when the time comes. A ruthless glint flashed across Yu Qianqiu's face. He waited until the sky became quiet for a short period of time. Then he rushed toward the southwest without saying a word, flying along the gravel ground of the Gobi Desert. Flying as low as possible would reduce the chances of being discovered. On the other side, third brother Xian was leading the way, attracting a large group of people. Third brother Xian suddenly felt a little excited. This was the first time he was being chased by so many people. But this was all thanks to Yu Qianqiu. However, his pursuer was not an idiot. After chasing for a while, he immediately realized that something was wrong. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, how could he fly so fast? Someone shouted, "Who's that?" At this moment, the sounds of fighting suddenly came from the southwest direction. "Not good, it's a diversion. Yu Qianqiu is over there." Someone shouted. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw dozens of people chasing after a figure flying close to the ground. A dense mass of green shadows blocked the pursuers. There was no need to guess. Those dense masses of green shadows were Yu Qianqiu's signature flying swords. Without the need for orders, the hundreds of people immediately stopped. One of the people in front shouted, "Cut in and block his way. We've been waiting for a long time. We can't let anyone take advantage of us." A group of people whizzed forward, intending to cut off Yu Qianqiu's path. Once the pursuers met up with the people blocking the way, they would naturally be able to surround Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu flew as fast as he could, cursing in his heart. Who would have thought that as soon as he flew out, a group of people would come over and discover him? They immediately chased after him. What else could he do? He released a bunch of flying swords to stop them and ran. Actually, he was right to choose the southwest direction. There were people blocking him in all the other directions except the southwest direction. Because the mist forest was in that direction, it was a natural barrier. There was no need to waste manpower to guard there. Take third brother Xian for example. Just when there was no one chasing after him, a few people came whistling through the air in front of him. Without saying a word, they joined hands with their flying swords and attacked him wildly. Third brother Xian dodged with a teleportation and cursed, "You old bastards, just you wait. I'll settle the score with you after this is over." As soon as he teleported away, the others felt something was wrong. Someone recognized the voice and shouted, "Stop fighting. It's third brother Xian." In the distance there were continuous bangs. Green lights flashed. The few of them looked at each other and ignored third brother Xian's curses. They quickly rushed to the place where the fight was happening. As long as they could get the two swords, it would be a great contribution. Even if the Xian brothers wanted to deal with them, their master would protect them. Third brother Xian stopped in the air. He looked at the direction of the fight. He was stunned. The strong wind blew the black cloth off his body. His eyes were wet. He muttered to himself emotionally, "You lied to me. We said we'd share blessings and misfortunes together. Why did you bear the hardship alone? Yu Qianqiu, you lied to me." Third brother Xian screamed at the sky. He lost control of the flying sword under his feet. His silhouette flashed and with a whoosh, he quickly rushed to the place where the fight was happening. The dozens of people chasing him did not have high cultivation. Other than the 10 who were at the early stage of passing calamity, the rest were about the same level as Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's 1,000 flying swords killed more than 10 original infant stage cultivators. As for the rest, Yu Qianqiu was confident that he could kill them all. But now was not the time to fight them. It would be troublesome if the others arrived. He was already halfway there. He could faintly see a rainbow in the distance. It was quiet, desolate, beautiful and mysterious. It should be the forgotten corner of the world, the fog forest. The middle-stage tribulation transcendence realm cultivators, who were chasing Yu Qianqiu, suddenly saw a large group of people coming from the northwest. They exchanged glances, and with a speed that was even faster than Yu Qianqiu's, they dashed in front of him. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, dodged left and right with his exquisite sword control skills. He managed to evade the slashes of the sword auras and continued to fly forward without a care for his life. It seemed like he wanted to reach the fog forest at all costs. But because he was flying close to the ground, the gravel exploded on his body, making him grimace in pain. A bunch of bastards. Just you wait. If I don't take revenge, I am not a man. Yu Qianqiu growled, gnashing his teeth. Since they had already been discovered, there was no longer any need for them to fly close to the ground. Otherwise, even if they were not killed by the other party, they would end up with a bloody nose and a swollen face. He quickly flew up on his sword and increased his flying altitude. Ah! With a muffled roar, he activated his sword art. The 1,000 flying swords formed a 2-meter-wide rectangular sword array and wrapped him in it. The cyan rectangular sword array rotated quickly. A cyan whirlwind carried him forward quickly. It was a spectacular scene. The few people who were fighting and flying in front of him had just attacked a few flying swords in the rotating sword array when the other flying swords came flying at them. Just the formation alone was enough to give them a fright, and they quickly dodged. The flying swords that were hit away quickly returned to the sword array and protected Yu Qianqiu as he moved forward quickly. The few of them attacked one after another, but they could not do anything to Yu Qianqiu. He did not even stop to fight with them and only cared about charging forward. Looking at the hundreds of people flying towards them, the few of them became anxious. One of them shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, leave your treasured saber and we will let you go. We will spare your life. Spare your mother. You trash, come and take it if you have the ability." Yu Qianqiu cursed. Suddenly he noticed a large group of people blocking his way. He felt helpless. If he had not been delayed by these bastards and wasted some time, he would have already charged in. Looking in all directions, there were many people rushing over. They were densely packed and they were all flying towards this place. It seemed like all the people chasing him had heard the news and were here. In front of him, the misty fog forest was surging with illusory colors. It was a vast, mysterious and boundless world. Like a seductive young lady, she was shrouded in a colorful and mysterious veil. For countless years, countless people wanted to remove this mysterious veil and kiss this young lady. However, behind the seduction was a naked ruthlessness. In the end, people flinched and gradually forgot about this mysterious young lady. Since they could not kiss her, they might as well forget about her. Originally, it was rare for anyone to come to this place for thousands of years. Wind and frost carved out a desolate aura in this field made of gravel, telling the occasional visitor that this place had been quiet for a very, very long time. However, this silence was broken today. Yu Qianqiu's crazy charge forward made the people blocking him guess something. Among the hundreds of people blocking him, there were more than 10 who were far ahead of the people behind them. This proved that their cultivation was higher than the others. Not good. This kid is going all out. He would rather die in the fog forest than let the treasured saber fall into the hands of others. One of them expressed his judgment. You want to die? It's not that easy. Even if you want to die, you have to leave the treasured saber behind. Another person laughed sinisterly. As they spoke, they completely exposed the nature of the cultivation world where the strong preyed on the weak. The cultivators of the various countries have heard the news and are here. Hurry up just in case. We will stop him first. Those behind follow up. Let's go. The person who was flying the fastest shouted. Since he was able to command everyone, it was obvious that he was the leader of this group of people. More than 10 people disappeared on the spot at the same time. They appeared in front of them once, then disappeared and appeared again. More than 10 people used teleportation at the same time. This meant that all of them were experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage. It was obvious that this group of people was determined to get the treasures. After teleporting 3 times, they lined up in front of the bewitching fog forest. They coldly looked at the spinning cyan sword formation that was rushing towards them. Naturally, the one inside the formation was Yu Qianqiu, their target. They were originally about the same distance from Yu Qianqiu to the fog forest. Moreover, their flying speed was obviously faster than Yu Qianqiu's. However, just in case, they actually teleported to intercept him. The 700 to 800 people behind them had already flocked over and lined up behind the 10 people. The person in the lead stared at the people who were entangled with Yu Qianqiu and let out a cold laugh. He waved his hand and said, "Go, chase away those flies behind us. At the same time, cut off all of that kid's escape routes. The treasures are ours." Almost 200 people immediately flashed behind him and surrounded him. Chapter 517. Within the territory of Jinshan country, only the master of this place, Pu Taidong, could mobilize 700 to 800 cultivators and use 14 masters at the final stage of nature's test at once. When they were in the territory of Dayang country, Pu Taidong didn't send anyone deep into the country because of his relationship with Huazongming. However, he sent a large number of people to block the border between the two countries and silently guard here. As long as Yu Qianqiu came here, he couldn't escape from their sight. What made these people rejoice was that Yu Qianqiu was really capable. He actually managed to escape from the encirclement of Dayang city. It was simply a miracle. Since God had given him such a big gift, how could they let him slip away again? Of course not. The leader was Pu Taidong's first disciple, Bai Meng. He secretly decided that he couldn't miss this opportunity. He must give the two treasured swords to his master. With a wave of his hand, 200 disciples surrounded the dozen people who were entangling with Yu Qianqiu. "Fellow cultivators of Hassa, get out of the way. Otherwise don't blame us for being rude." It was Bai Meng's first disciple, Dian Yuming, who said this. The situation was stronger than the person. With a large number of people led by his master behind him, he was more confident. The people who were entangling with Yu Qianqiu all changed their expressions. They also understood that the situation was stronger than the person. They all stopped and didn't dare to act rashly. They were cultivators of Hassa. This time, they also sent nearly 100 people, including 5 or 6 masters at the final stage of nature's test. However, the top masters were not in this direction. When they arrived, it would be too late. But there was no other way. It was better than dying. It was just a pity for the dozen people who were killed by Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. There was a fierce light in his eyes. Although he saw that the dozen people could teleport and knew that they were masters at the final stage of nature's test, he didn't slow down and kept rushing forward. The misty forest with surging dreamy colors was just behind them. As long as he could get through it, he would have a place to stand and play with them slowly. Humph. He doesn't know what's good for him. Bai Meng waved his hand again and said, "Stop him before the others arrive. I'm afraid that something might happen if I delay." The 500 to 600 cultivators behind him rushed forward one after another. In an instant, flying swords fell like rain and silver lightning roared crazily. They interweaved into a magnificent silver net and swept forward. Even though Yu Qianqiu had 1,000 flying swords, he would not be able to gain the upper hand against 500 to 600 flying swords that were controlled individually. Concentrating on controlling one sword was definitely better than controlling thousands of swords at once. Kaka. Yu Qianqiu continued to charge towards the hundreds of flying swords with a sinister smile on his face. His violent nature, which was bound to explode under pressure, was revealed without a doubt. He charged forward without fear of death. When he was about 100 meters away from the opposite flying sword, he rushed forward with his arms wide open and shouted, "Star Flame Fire Art." At this point he had no choice but to fight unless he retreated back to Utopia. However, they were destined to have a showdown today, so how could they cower? If they wanted to run, they would have done so long ago. Since the other party wanted to force him into a dead end, then there was no need for him to pretend to be kind. From today onwards they would not stop until one of them was dead. Those who were afraid of death would leave, and those who weren't would continue to play to the end. Boom. A cyan storm suddenly exploded. Cyan flames swept away the clouds and rushed out unscrupulously, spreading rapidly. The scorching heat crazily flooded in all directions in a split second. The thousands of flying swords instantly flashed back into the flames, disappearing without a trace. A huge green light shone between the heaven and earth. Even though the group of people had heard that this guy knew how to do this, when they saw it for themselves, it was simply shocking. They could not imagine how a person could store such a large amount of flames in his body. The people surrounding him were shocked and involuntarily retreated from the high temperature. The 500 to 600 flying swords were instantly swallowed by the surging green flames. The expressions of the 500 to 600 people changed. The moment the flying swords rushed into the sea of flames, they immediately lost contact with them. It seemed like they had been disarmed by the other party in an instant. Facing the surging green flames, the 500 to 600 people had no choice but to retreat. Use the sword intent to break his fire. Bai Meng shouted because everyone knew that Chu Dingfang's sword intent had broken the green flames. It was obvious that the sword intent was not afraid of the high temperature of the green flames. 14 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage flashed to the front. 14 heaven-raising swords appeared, wanting to shred the surging green flames into pieces. Don't. Third Xian's sorrowful cry came from afar. He clearly saw the 14 heaven-raising swords and could tell that these 14 people were experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. With 14 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage joining hands, it was hard to imagine what would happen to Yu Qianqiu. If you want to break my green flames, then I will break your sword intent. Within the green flames, Yu Qianqiu shook his sleeves. Slippery black shadows continuously flashed out from his sleeves and hovered in front of him. The instant the 14 heaven-raising swords chopped down, Yu Qianqiu pushed out his palms and shouted, "Kill!" Just as the 14 huge transparent sword intent chopped down with a strong wind and broke the green flames, a group of densely packed black shadows suddenly shot out from the green flames like lightning. What did it mean to destroy everything? What did it mean to destroy everything? What did it mean to be successful in every endeavor? Today Yu Qianqiu's black flame-flying swords would give Pu Taidong, the disciple of a mid-divine transformation stage expert, a wonderful demonstration. Back then Yu Qianqiu relied on the black flame-flying swords to defeat 2 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage in the Battle of Wanghai Town in Huaxia. From then on, Yu Qianqiu regarded the black flame-flying sword as a supreme treasure, and he treated it as his trump card. He wouldn't easily use it unless it was a critical moment because once it was used it would kill. This was his trump. Now, everyone in the cultivation world wanted to force him into a dead end. The killing intent in his heart was boiling. Since everyone in the world has betrayed me, why should I think of myself as a sentimental person? Kill. Swish, swish, swish. Hiss, hiss, hiss. As dense as rain, the black shadows flashed. The 14 sword intent disintegrated in an instant and disappeared without a trace. The collapse was so sudden that the 14 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage found it hard to believe. The pupils of the 14 people suddenly shrank as they saw the densely packed black dots shooting toward them. They were all pure black flying swords. They were unbelievably sharp, cutting through the sword intent as if they were cutting paper. Among the 14 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, a few reacted quickly. Protective aura surged out to block the flying swords. Bai Meng saw this from the corner of his eyes and was instantly shocked. If the black flying swords could so easily break through the sword intent, then no matter how strong the protective aura was, it would not be difficult to break through it. There's something strange about the flying swords. Don't fight them head-on. As Bai Meng shouted, he quickly flew into the air. A few people who did not set up protective aura also saw the clues and quickly flew into the air. At this moment, life and death could be decided in an instant. It was too late for the 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage who had protective aura. In addition, they had protective aura, so they couldn't even teleport. They just bounced up. Ah! 5 shrill screams were heard. The protective aura was instantly pierced through by the flying swords, and it did not have any effect on blocking the attacks. The bodies of the 5 people trembled in the air. They were pierced by the flying swords like sieves, and their bodies were full of bloody holes. Then, like kites with broken strings, they fell straight to the ground. However, before their bodies fell to the ground, they were swallowed by the surging green flames. It was impossible to see them again, not even their ashes. 7th junior brother. 3rd junior brother. 9th junior brother. Bai Meng and the others who had just jumped into the air all cried out in pain. At this moment, another 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage appeared. They were the people who had stopped 3rd Xian and attacked together. These 5 people were the 5 top masters from Hassa. They couldn't wait to stabilize their bodies and stop in the air. They looked at each other. They saw the scene just now with their own eyes. The green flames surged and the black swords rained fiercely, killing 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage in an instant. Although they weren't familiar with the 5 people who died, they had met them before. The 5 people who died were also at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage like them, and the number of people who died was the same as them. The 5 people were frightened and didn't dare to rush over again. It was better to wait and see first. 3rd Xian, who followed closely, also stopped beside the 5 people. He looked at all of this with his eyes wide open, and he couldn't wrap his head around it for a long time. Oh my! This guy killed 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage in an instant. The 500 to 600 people who saw it with their own eyes were even more shocked. How was it possible? In the blink of an eye, 5 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage died just like that? Run. Someone in the crowd screamed, and everyone immediately scattered in panic. After the black swords killed the 5 people, they didn't stop at all. First, they scattered, thinking that they were going to chase Bai Meng and the others. Then, they suddenly turned around and surrounded the 500 to 600 people behind them. Let's see. The 500 to 600 people were scared out of their wits. They were disarmed by Qing Hua just now, and didn't even have a weapon in their hands. Everyone was shocked by the situation just now, and they were suddenly attacked like this. It was really fatal. It wasn't that they didn't have a way out. The way out was right behind them, the misty forest that was shining with psychedelic colors. For them, what was the difference between this and having no way out? For a moment, everyone took out everything in their storage pouches that they could use to block the attack. Hee hee. A sinister laughter came from the green sea of fire, and the densely packed black flying swords madly strangled them. In an instant, the wailing and wailing made everyone who heard it tremble. The bloody scene of the massacre would give people nightmares at night. It could only be described as too horrible to look at. None of the things they took out could block the strangling of the black flying swords. When this black sword net fell, only the 100 people who reacted quickly at the beginning escaped. None of the remaining 400 to 500 people were spared. Limbs were broken and flesh and blood were flying everywhere. Yu Qianqiu, stop. Bai Meng clenched his fists tightly, and used all his strength to shout for them to stop. Chapter 518. Apart from the direction of the misty forest, cultivators from other countries who were chasing after Yu Qianqiu arrived one after another. However, they were all baffled by the miserable cries. More and more people arrived, but they all gathered at the outskirts. No one approached. Compared to the people who rushed over in a hurry before, they were like 2 different people. The people who arrived later did not understand what was going on. They asked the people who arrived first what was going on. After getting the answer, they were all dumbfounded. Hearing Bai Meng's sorrowful cry, everyone was silent. They all decided to wait and see. Bai Meng's cry was met with Yu Qianqiu's sneer from within the sea of fire. There's something wrong with your head. The black flying swords continued to kill. Bai Meng and the others could only watch. They wanted to help, but when they thought of the unstoppable power of the flying swords, they were powerless to approach. They were already scared out of their wits by the black flying swords. The few hundred people below were almost completely wiped out. The remaining people were forced into a dead end by the black sword net. They had no choice but to release their protective aura and charge into the colorful and thin fog behind them. They tried to hold on for a while and then come out again. What came as quite a surprise to the spectators was that the mysterious and fearsome mist forest wasn't as terrifying as they had imagined. Those people actually managed to survive in a hopeless situation. Even the protective aura of nascent soul cultivators could be used. Withstanding the protective aura, they really managed to run out from the other end. Everyone guessed that it might be because the fog at the outskirts was thin and the poison was not strong. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to escape so easily. After all, the misty forest that had been legendary for countless years was not a joke. With an example, almost everyone died. The remaining few dozen people no longer hesitated. They all released their protective aura and rushed in. The ground was covered with broken limbs, dismembered corpses, and a pool of blood. As the green sea of fire blew past, everything was instantly turned into ashes. The bloody history just now was completely erased. The road ahead was unobstructed. Yu Qianqiu successfully charged into the colorful fog. That surging green sea of flames gradually disappeared along with Yu Qianqiu in the 7-colored fog. The black flying swords also disappeared in their wake. Perhaps it was because of the heat, but the color of the fog had become thicker. Previously, they could see dozens of meters away, but now they could only see 1 or 2 meters away. Bai Meng's group of 9 landed in front of the misty forest. Their faces were ashen. In total, there were close to 800 people. These were the rising stars of the sect, the future backbone of the sect. But looking at it now, there were only about 300 people left. Yu Qianqiu had single-handedly massacred nearly 500 people. The most distressing thing was that 5 experts at the end of the crossing tribulation stage had died just like that. Bai Meng's entire body was trembling uncontrollably, his fists clenched to the point of cracking sounds. If he had killed Yu Qianqiu and obtained the treasured saber, it would still be acceptable. But in the end he did not obtain anything and instead caused such a huge loss. How was he going to explain this to his master when he returned? Thousands of people had gathered in the surrounding air. At this time they all landed one after another. Looking at the pile of ashes on the ground, they all shook their heads and sighed. At the same time, they secretly felt lucky that they did not block Yu Qianqiu first. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. No one had expected that Yu Qianqiu could be so powerful. It happened almost in an instant. Nearly 500 people, including 5 cultivators at the end of the crossing tribulation stage, were killed just like cutting melons and vegetables. Especially the 10 cultivators of Hassa who were lucky enough to survive and began to chase Yu Qianqiu, they were even more frightened. It turned out that Yu Qianqiu had not been serious with them. Otherwise, none of them would have been able to escape. These people glanced at the people of Jinshan country, who all had deathly pale expressions and couldn't help but gloat secretly. They thought it was good that they died. Who told them to be so arrogant at the beginning? They were rushing to die. However, they still had to thank them. Otherwise, no one would know who the ashes on the ground belonged to. The muscles on third brother Xian's face twitched. He didn't know how many trump cards this guy had. The absorbing stars technique was scary enough, and now he had a batch of black flying swords. Even cultivators at the end of the crossing tribulation stage could be killed as easily as cutting cabbages. Thinking that he was also at the end of the crossing tribulation stage, he couldn't help but shiver. He knew his bad temper very well. If he didn't need Yu Qianqiu's help, he would have fallen out with this guy many times. They really fought. Third brother Xian didn't dare to think about what would happen next. Brother Bai Meng, I'm sorry for your loss. Brother Bai Meng, don't be sad. There will be a chance for revenge eventually. People who knew Bai Meng all comforted him. Although their words sounded nice, they didn't know how many of them were sincere. There was also someone who snorted, "This guy probably died when he entered the fog forest." It's a pity that those 2 treasured sabers are going to be lost in the vast fog forest. At this point, that person was slightly startled. He seemed to have thought of something. He looked around and realized that everyone was thinking about the same thing as him. Everyone was reminded by his words. If Yu Qianqiu really died in there, they wouldn't dare to go in and look for him with their cultivation. However, the soul formation stage masters behind them could go in and look for him with their high cultivation. Everyone looked around with flickering eyes. They memorized the direction where Yu Qianqiu entered and prepared to wait. If Yu Qianqiu really didn't come out, this direction was the best place to find the treasured sabers. They could go back and report to their masters. What's wrong with them? Among the people looking around, someone suddenly pointed at the disciples beside Bai Meng and asked in surprise. Everyone looked over, only to see the dozens of people standing together, all of them silent and motionless under the crowd's gesticulations. His expression was ordinary, but his face was glowing with a sparkling luster. The skin on his face looked even better than a woman's, and he had a delicate and alluring charm. Bai Meng and the others were stunned as well. Fifth junior brother Lu Jinyang, who was by his side, frowned and said, "What's wrong with all of you?" In the end, even after he shouted a few times, those several tens of people still didn't move, and this was slightly unusual. Lu Jinyang slowly walked over and stood in front of the dozens of people. He found that their bright eyes were shining brightly, but they seemed to have no one in their eyes. They didn't even look at him, an elder of the sect standing in front of them. Disrespecting one's elders? If it was just one person, it would still be acceptable. However, if all of them did the same, it would be impossible for something like this to happen. Lu Jinyang walked over and raised his hand, wanting to pat one of them. Yet he heard Bai Meng shout, "Junior martial brother, don't touch it with your hands." Lu Jinyang's hand hung there, not knowing what was going on. Bai Meng said in a low voice, "They are all disciples who just came out of the misty forest. They might have been poisoned." When everyone heard this, they all whispered to each other and nodded, obviously agreeing with Bai Meng's words. Lu Jinyang was shocked and didn't dare to touch it anymore. If he was infected by a deadly poison, it wouldn't be fun. Taking a few steps back, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. With a whoosh, a gust of wind shot out and hit one of the people's face. He had grasped the appropriate amount of strength. This gust of wind that he shot out would at most cause the person to have a bloody nose and a swollen face. There wouldn't be any other consequences. However, what surprised him was that the disciple's skin color wasn't just tender and alluring, it had really reached the point where it could be broken by a blow. With a light doo sound, a pitch-black hole appeared on the disciple's face. giving Lu Xingyang a fright. How could this be? I didn't hit so hard. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. From the hole on the disciple's face, pitch-black dirty water started to flow out. It flowed down his cheeks and dyed his clothes black. Just as the dirty water flowed out, wrinkles started to appear on the smooth skin on his face. Then, starting from his head, he started to shrink. Then he swayed unsteadily and slowly fell backwards. The people standing behind him were knocked down by him and also fell down unsteadily. One by one, dozens of people fell down in an instant. And when those people fell down, they were immediately like brittle paper bags filled with water. After falling to the ground, they couldn't withstand the pressure and burst open. Hua hua. The dirty water flowed all over the ground, and the people nearby all took a few steps back to avoid it. Those who fell down were all stuck to the ground like paper, soaked in the dirty water. A disgusting stench started to spread in the air. Everyone frowned, and at the same time they were secretly shocked. What a powerful poison. In such a short period of time, other than the skin on the surface of the body, the blood, flesh, and bones all turned into black dirty water, and the outside became even brighter and brighter. Everyone looked at the dense fog forest again and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The colorful fog of the dense fog forest looked gorgeous and colorful, but it contained a deadly poison. Looking at the people who were still poisoned, they still looked bright on the outside. Who could imagine that their insides were actually a puddle of pitch-black dirty water? Why is it like this? Lu Xingyang muttered to himself and looked at his hand that flicked out the wind. Although he knew that these disciples were poisoned to death, he felt that he was the main culprit. In the blink of an eye, that flick of his finger caused another dozens of disciples to disappear. The remaining close to 300 cultivators of Jinshan country all had deathly pale faces. Everyone was silent out of fear and no one said a word. It would probably take a long time for the shadow hanging over their heads to disappear. Bai Meng's breathing gradually became heavy. He suddenly raised his hand and slapped out a strong wind, slapping the remaining few poisoned disciples, causing everyone to once again witness a disgusting scene. Bai Meng walked with large strides to the front of the dense fog forest and shouted angrily, "You Qianqiu, come out for me if you have the guts." He shouted at the top of his lungs a few times, but only heard his voice travel far away and no one responded. The cultivators of the surrounding countries all shook their heads and sighed. This Bai Meng was probably mad with anger. That Yu Qianqiu had already been in there for such a long time, and the odds were against him. However, Yu Qianqiu's actions were a bit strange. Since he had such extraordinary ability, why didn't he break out of the encirclement? Why did he have to enter this place of death? It was really unimaginable. Third XN looked into the depths of the fog and kept muttering to himself, "It's all my fault, it's all my fault." Lu Xingyang tightened his lips and went over to pull Bai Meng. "Eldest senior brother, it has already happened, we need to think about it at length." Just as the two of them turned around, Yu Qianqiu's sinister laughter suddenly came from the dense fog forest. "What are you shouting for? I have always had guts. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. Take this." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.